The broadcast is live. Here
I
we go.
I'd like to say it's a celebration, but he's going to be leaving us for the celebration. But somebody's got a birthday, you know.
That'd be me.
The last thing we talked about off air is the first thing we'll talk about on air. So,
My birthday today. You know what I had for dinner?
oh,
I had, first of all, I'm too old to have dinner and cake. That's just like not going to happen. So I had a brownie banana split for dinner.
well, that's cool.
So we had dessert for dinner.
Yes, I had dessert for dinner because there's no way I'm just too old to eat dinner and dessert. That'll just make me fat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I realized we'll mention your birthday a couple of times because like nobody's watching right now. It's Friday night.
Okay.
On at 6 o'clock. Yeah.
And I made myself a hamburger for lunch. That was very good. I enjoyed that.
Hamburgers are good.
Yeah,
We,
hamburgers are good. I don't eat a lot of hamburgers. Usually I have hamburgers like during the summer at barbecues or whatever, but no barbecues this summer. Like usually my friend Seth on Memorial Day down in Long Island throws a barbecue where he just has every meat you can think of that he's barbecuing. And I usually don't eat that much meat, only for no reason except habit, because I'd have to cook for myself then if I was eating a lot of meat. So it's like that day it's like that's all I eat. I don't have any bread, anything like that. I don't even make a sandwich out of the meat. I just have like a fork full of this, a fork full of that, a fork full of the other thing.
Well, that's what you got to do with the meat. I just hope when you make a burger, I'm kind of a snob about it. I hope you're grilling,
No, I was frying pan and not grilling, but it's all right. I'm okay with fried burgers.
Okay, put your cheese on it and just pour the grease on it. I've been seeing that a lot on these YouTube cooking videos, and I'm like, you sick mother effers, man.
Usually, what I've been doing for when I'm making them in the frying pan is, when I take them off, I set them on a separate plate with a paper towel under it for about 30 seconds to a minute, so that most of the grease. Because what I don't like is if you put it immediately on the bun, all that grease goes right into the bottom bun and destroys the structural integrity of the bun.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm going to drag Paulo in this since we're Americans, and when I say Portugal, I like how it sounds like some pulp exotic land to us.
It's mostly fish and seafood.
Yes.
Fish
and bread. We have lots of bread.
Oh, that's awesome.
Bread is
fresh.
good.
I bet it's fresh bread from bakeries and stuff, isn't it? Not like the store-bought stuff with the plastic and the tassel. Yeah.
Oh, what's his name? One of Roger, who hasn't been on YouTube in a while, but he used to be a staple 5 years ago on.
I got him on Facebook.
Yeah, he's on Facebook too. I think he's a baker.
Roger 6502179 17 20 and 5. How are you doing today? Yes, my buddy.
I think he's a baker.
Chef that owns his own bakery, I think. So if you have him on Facebook, he's always putting on what he has cooked, and the man is an artist.
Right. Yeah, when I told him to get a new mic, I remember years ago, because I used to not understand a word he was saying, because he's got the first of all, he's from Puerto Rico, so he's got the Spanish accent. Then he had a mic that wasn't very good, so he'd be putting up on this YouTube video, and I can only catch about every other word.
Yeah, and then he would also he lives in a beach, so he has this great big huge hollowed out bungalow that and when he reads his comics, he's got one of those chairs that you set in the sand. He's got probably I think a Coors Light, maybe a Bud Light, and then he's there just bare chested. And when the guy had a heart attack, he's sitting there complaining about the food in the hospital. That was his concern. Like, what is this garbage?
People in like beer. It's either beer or not beer.
I got ruined. I have some friends, Anderson and them, that I always talk about. They would get ale. Like, I had a few ales over the years. You know what I mean? A dark ale and all this stuff. And now I drink a beer, and it used to be like first couple drinks was refreshing, then it was social drink, and now I'm like, this is garbage. I'm like, I'm sitting here like that coming from me. You would be amazed if you knew my history of like Tim snubbing beer,
I developed a taste for a Bavarian wheat beer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had that. Yes,
I've never been a drinker, so all beer tastes like dirt to me.
I consider myself retired at the age of 24. We got into the deep here. All right, John Jones is here.
Speaking of retired at 24, I can remember I've told you last week I missed would have been my 30th annual barbecue, but because of COVID, I didn't have it. There was a lot of my friends I still have from my college days. A lot of them worked at Marvel with me too. And like in my college days, they were all big drinkers, kind of, young drinking, artist type drinking, whatever. So they used to, whenever I had my barbecue, they'd bring drinks, of course. They'd bring beer and whatever. Sometime in our late 20s, people pretty much stopped drinking like they used to, but they didn't stop bringing beer like they used to. So it was like at the end of every one of my parties, I'd have like 3 cases of beer left. I'd be like, guys, stop bringing beer. You're not drinking it. It took like 10 years for them to make the adjustment. And then once they started having kids too, it went from beer to juice boxes. So it was like a transition there. But for a good 10 years, it was like that. You're not. Why are you still bringing the same amount of beer you used to bring? Because you don't drink it.
Well, when my son was born, I just stopped drinking. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was the last thing on my mind. And it was a good thing. It was a good thing because I'd get 2 40 ounces and sleep. And when I woke up, they'd be gone on some weekends. Like I would binge drink throughout the weekends. I mean, work hard, party hard. It's just
right.
Yeah. So plus,
I inherited the taste for whiskey from my dad, but I already got him to switch from J&B to Jameson, which is much better.
I always pictured myself in my old age taking up drinking whiskey because whiskey drinkers seem to enjoy it, so especially old whiskey drinkers seem to really enjoy their whiskey. But I never have. But
I wanted to become an expert on Irish whiskey, but that's even more expensive than becoming an expert on comics.
You guys wanted to have a flask, didn't you? You wanted to have the little flask that you, and those flasks did not hold that much. But I was a vodka drinker, and I looked up because the vodka is actually a clean liquor, as how they describe it, less hangover, which explains a whole lot, Yeah,
I can still remember the one time I met one of those water is for washing guys. I was like, I thought you were just a literary creation. It was early 90s. My friend and I took a road trip to Chicago and Green Bay to see a Cubs game, a White Sox game, and a Green Bay Packers game one week. He was like, want to take this trip with me? I'm like, yeah, sure. And we stayed in like this condo around Green Bay. And there was just, 2 other guys staying there too, who we didn't know, who were going to a game or something too. And the one guy, I don't know how old he was, probably my age now. He was like in his 50s or 60s. And he had the entire 2 days we were there, he had a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. And it was like, he was, water is for washing. He didn't drink anything but whiskey. It was like, okay. And he never appeared to be drunk or anything. That's just what he was, just hanging out, watching TV with his whiskey.
You can drink 4 or 5 glasses of whiskey per day and not get drunk. You just have to. You start in the morning and you end in the evening, but you just need 5 glasses.
That's what he was doing. I was just like, okay, he's one of those guys.
That's called
I've only seen them in the movies.
That's called being a functional alcoholic. Scott, let's do a mic check, man. When we got on here, I couldn't hear anybody.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, man.
All right. Yeah, it's a good thing I don't like alcohol, because if I did, I'd probably weigh like 800 pounds.
Yes, I'm not a drinker either. I never picked up the habit. All my friends were in my youth.
Everybody asked me it's a moral thing. It's like, no, I just can't stand the taste or the smell.
What's weird is the only thing I drink is water. I don't like anything sweet to drink. I don't even drink soft drinks. I don't know why.
I kind of start with those. The sweet drink I like is a cappuccino in the morning.
I don't drink coffee either.
I got to where I was drinking nothing but water 9 times out of 10, but I'm getting into my bad habits, and I'm a short dude, so when I gain weight, you can see it. But we're 10 minutes in. We got 8 viewers here, so I'm going to throw something out
comics?
I guess.
What?
Yeah, Charlton66 sent me some things.
Okay.
And I don't know how many people go to Baltimore Comic-Con, but this is one of the things I love about Baltimore Comic-Con. No, you won't be able to see it because it's gold. But what they do is every year they have a featured character, and all the artists that are there at Baltimore Con will do a pinup in these books. And they are on my app, my collector's app. But this has Jose Garcia Lopez. It's got Steve Sakai and everybody. And they pick a character. I don't know what the deal is, an honored character, and they all draw it. This is from some book called Black Sand that looks like it's film noir, and everybody has animal heads. Black Sod. Okay.
Yeah, there's no N in there.
You keep calling him Steve Sakai, too.
That thing is the most acclaimed European comic of the last decade and a half.
You know it's Stan, too. I've heard you say
Stan. I'm getting the first name wrong. It's not a pronunciation thing.
I know, yeah. You just keep calling him Steve for some reason.
I think it's because I went to basic training with a guy named Steve Sakai, for real.
There you go. That'll do it.
I don't want to throw out an excuse, but it's there, you know.
That's the only reason to call him Steve is a Steve Sakai.
And I know it's Stan, yeah.
He got the ST part right.
This was the book that I was surprised to get in there. I'm considering this a wedding gift, but it's Justice League 55 where Robin's grown up with that awful costume, but I love it. You know, the little Silver Age glory there, you know. Yeah. Trying to keep the glare off of it. It's in Mylar, and it's a beautiful copy. So when I opened up the package he sent me and I saw this, I about dropped it. I was like, it's too much.
Mylar makes everything look good, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, and it's a beautiful copy too, man. But I love those Earth 2 guys. That's my thing. And then he sent me another back issue magazine all about the Legion. And it has an article on Manhunter 2070 in it, which I was like, this is cookie cutter made for me.
I used to buy back issue all the time, but I kind of stopped for no particular reason. But it's a really good book.
It's a great book, but I think I get it by the theme of the book. But it's got that in here. It has some Mike Grell stuff. I mean, this was like cookie cutter made for me. Anything I've kind of been talking about it. Star Slayer. Yeah.
Sometimes the themes I know nothing about turn out to be the best one. Like I said, that one that was all about Harvey comics, I loved because I knew nothing about Harvey comics.
Yeah.
Tim and I met the editor of back issue. His name's Michael Urey at a small local convention. He's a really nice fellow.
Okay. He's a real cool guy. He let us know that he and Roy Thomas sort of have this understanding, maybe a handshake deal. Golden Age and Silver Age goes into Alter Ego, and that's Roy's territory, and then he gets Bronze Age up on back issue. Yeah. They haven't agreed.
I had a phase where I was buying Alter Ego around the year 2000, 2001, and then I had to stop because that thing was so successful that it went monthly, and I love the magazine. I mean, not only that, I love the magazine, but I just couldn't justify buying it and not reading it because they were piling up, and I'm gonna have to stop this otherwise.
Yeah,
it's gonna go out of control. It's a shame, really, because it was exactly the thing I needed. Talking about all those publishers from the 40s and 50s who don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes the magazine was better than the comics it talked about.
Oh yeah,
yeah. That's kind of the problem with the Golden Age.
See, I love those old school artists. Those are my guys. You know, Russ Heath, Al Williamson.
Speaking of the Golden Age, I just got this for my birthday. Lily Renee, Escape Artist, it's called. And this, it's by, I think Trina Robbins writes it, illustrated by Ann Timmons and Moo O. And I'd never heard of her before. Lily Renee Wilhelm was an early Golden Age artist. I think, and she, what does it say here? In 1938, Lily Renee Wilhelm is a 14-year-old Jewish girl living in Vienna. Her days are filled with art and ballet. Then the Nazis march into Austria, and Lily's life is shattered overnight. Suddenly, her country is no longer safe for her and her family. To survive, Lily leaves her parents behind and travels alone to England. Escaping the Nazis is only the start of Lily's journey. So eventually, she made her way to the U.S. and became a golden age comic book artist for a little while. And then I think the rest of her life is supposed to be equally as interesting. Cool. So there's a golden age comic artist for you who I've never heard of. But have you ever read that book, 10 Cent Plague?
About Joe Sacco? Is that it?
No. It's actually a textbook. It's about the.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's called 10 Cent Plague, and it's about the comics code and what happened to lead up to the comics code, and and how comics became demonized in the U.S. in the 50s. Mm-hmm. And at the end of it is really sad, because there's just at the end of it is a list of people who never worked in comics again, and it's just pages and pages long.
The Red Scare. They were communists.
Filled with men and women who golden age artists and other people who worked in the comics who just after the comic scare of the 50s just never worked in comics again. It's like, wow, that was a lot. Hey, John.
Hello.
Another week gone by. Yep. But if you ever get a chance to read 10 Cent Plague, give it a read. It's a text, it's a text about the history of that time and era and what happened.
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out. I probably will look for it tonight, just to see who all those artists are. I mean, that's sad. That's sad.
Oh, it really was sad. I mean, the book actually opens with whoever the author was, like tracking down this woman who was a golden age artist. And, rings her doorbell, says, so-and-so, comic books want to talk to you. And she's like, oh, you don't know what they did to us? And that was like the opening of the book. It was just like, ooh.
Oh, my God. Well, I want to complain real quick, because what I'm about to say is, I mean, it's kind of weird following that, this doesn't seem that big a deal now, But, I'm a connoisseur, if you will, big fan of all types of genres of music and stuff, right? So on Facebook, I got this thing called Slicing Up Eyeballs. I think they're on Sirius XM, but they're all about the legacy of 80s college rock, the alternative music of the 80s, right? So they showed these great stickers and pins you could get for like $5 or something, right? So you get these little pins. It's like a tape recorder, and it says, not a tape recorder, but it's cassettes, and I'm not going to show up, Slicing Up Eyeballs. But they had these really cool stickers that you can put on things that look like cassette tapes, right? And it's got like the Smiths, Depeche Mode on it, Public Image, LTD, and The Cure. And then when I get the freaking sticker, they ruin it because they put their logo on a half of it. What am I going to stick that on? I've got two.
They couldn't have even moved the logo to the other half.
The logo wasn't in the picture when I ordered. You had something cool going on and you ruined it. Ruined it.
No fun.
Yeah. I want my $7 back. No.
I only got 3 comics this week.
$2.
First being the latest issue of Usagi Yojimbo.
Nice.
And I must say it's interesting, Usagi Yojimbo in color, so Sleepy Reader will read it. I must say it's been interesting reading, because I've been getting this and the reprints of the very earliest Usagi Yojimbo. And what's interesting is in this story, he's going back to his old hometown for the first time since, he left it many years ago. And the reprint's first story is him leaving his hometown. Mm-hmm. So it's really this interesting sort of bookends that I'm reading at the same time. And of course, the reprints I haven't read in 30 years, so they're all new to me.
Yeah. Now, we got 12 people here. We got 12 people here. We'll come back to Usagi there real quick. But now that we have people here, now we can say it again. We said at the beginning of the show and nobody was here, but Jared, it is his birthday. He's going to be sticking around until he's dragged away from us.
I've got some sort of birthday party video thing going on at some time. I'm not sure.
I hope they cut your pants off and smear you with oil, and grease, black grease and stuff.
I'm already wearing shorts, so they can just smear oil on my legs.
Tim likes to watch those kind of videos.
When I'm in the mood.
When he's awake.
And the other comic I got, Collar made him a convert to Usagi. Yep.
Yeah, Scott turned me on to Usagi, and on one hand, I hate that I missed those years.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I hate that I missed those years, but I'm also glad that it's all out there, now.
Yeah. Reaver, this is number 10, part 4 or 5 of the latest story. I'm really enjoying this one, except I had one of those embarrassing moments at the end of the story where, like I said, I'm really enjoying the story. The first story arc was like the Dirty Dozen or the Suicide Squad. And then the second story arc is a couple of the characters who survived trying to get some peace in this border town they're living in, but not being able to. And the last page, someone shows up on the last page that's supposed to be a surprise and a shock. And I'm like, who is that character? I don't know who that character is. Damn it. I should know who that character is due to the storytelling, but I have no idea.
It was Irving Forbush.
Yeah. It's like, the book's only 10 issues old. I think it was the guy from the beginning of the story, but I'm not 100% positive because I think he's got a different haircut. But I'm like, this moment should have more impact on me, but I have lost track of who this character is. So it's kind of, I hate when that happens. That happens more than I care for it to happen reading comics. Well, it happens when you read a random comic too. That's why sometimes somebody showing up at the end of the comic as a big reveal isn't that big a reveal when you just happen to pull out random issue. It's like, oh, let's check out what's happening in the latest issue of Spider-Man, and Spider Clone number 17 shows up shockingly at the end, and you're like, am I supposed to know who this guy is? So it's a common occurrence, just not in a comic that's 10 issues old. And then the third comic I got for this week is Walter Simonson's Ragnarok, The Breaking of Helheim.
Oh, cool.
And this is 6 of 6, which means it should be coming out in a trade paperback if you want to get it that way. But it was real good. This was because what he's doing, he's kind of and also had one of the prettiest explosions I've ever seen. Double page spread explosion. That's just really, the graphic design and color in it are just really nice. I was like going, wow, that's a beautiful explosion.
It's funny you brought that up because the one explosion I can always remember from comics was the one in Akira.
Which explosion in Akira?
There's just the first one you saw was just solid black. Yeah.
They blew up Neo Tokyo a few times in Akira. As a matter of fact, that was one of my criticisms of Akira, is there was a lot of repetition in that comic. Neo Tokyo was about to explode, and it did, and it did, and it did, and it did.
It's just one of the things that stuck out. That's the first time I saw a depiction of a solid black explosion.
Wow. Well, Walter's been doing a really good job telling, his own Norse stories. There it is, Little Akira, Black Explosion.
Right.
What issue number is that?
This one is number 16.
See that? It exploded in the beginning, exploded in the middle, exploded near the end.
Just like Thanksgiving dinner. Does it look like Ragnarok is going to continue after that, or does it seem like it's wrapped up in that 6 issues?
Yeah, I don't blame you, Sleepy Reader, for dumping it when they raised the price to $5. No. I don't blame you at all, but I'm sure the trades will be cheaper than that. But it doesn't. Besides the fact that I'm friends with Walter, it doesn't bother me too much because it's not like it's coming out every month for $5.
I'm not going to lie. Right. I had some anxiety in my chest there for just a minute. Like, where's this going to go? Oh shit!
Tim, did I ever tell you? Did I ever tell you my story about meeting Walt Simonson? I didn't recognize who he was at first.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, you told
Just
it to me.
wandered.
Yeah.
I was at Dragon Con several years ago in Atlanta. It's an absolutely huge convention. And I sat down to see a panel presentation by the designer Sid Mead. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So I'm sitting there, and this guy taps me on this because there's like one empty chair beside me. It's like up towards the front. There weren't many other empty chairs. This guy taps me and asks me if you can sit down. I'm like, sure. And then I looked. It's like, it looks familiar. And that was Walt Simonson. You know? And then we started having a little conversation. Of course, I didn't have anything, Brad brought anything for him to sign or anything like that, but had a little conversation about the model of the haunted tank he built. And that was really cool. I wish now I'd have asked him better questions than I had at the time, but it was just funny. I was like, he looks familiar. Oh. Okay.
That's one of the things that like I get lost on when I drove a lot more for work is I would think about all these comic book conventions, all these pictures I would see of people at comic book conventions with the comic artists and writers, and a lot of people on YouTube. We're all one person, 1 degree separated. If you really think about it, I'm like, these artists have met all of us. We know each other. They have no clue what we talk, what we do.
I mean, if you think about it, you're probably only a few steps from technically being able to be in contact with just about anybody.
Yeah.
Not just.
It's funny. Did you? Speaking of not in contact with people, but not even knowing who they are.
I mean, we got Paulo here from across the ocean. That's what amazed me about this stuff.
Did you see the picture I posted on Facebook this week of it was one of my friend Bunch's pictures from around 1990 at Marvel, and it was Mark Teixeira, Javier Saltares, Jim Sanders III, and we couldn't figure out who the fourth guy was in the picture. My friend Bunch thought it was Mark Bagley, but a few people who worked there were like, no, that's not Mark Bagley. And it took, people at Marvel who worked in the 90s, it took us half a day to figure out. I think they said that was Brian Hitch. And I was like, I had never met Brian Hitch. And so I didn't know who it looked like. And my friend Bunch who took the pic, my friend Bunch was in the picture. And he was like, why am I remembering that as Mark Bagley if it's not? So I was like, no, you could even have met these people and not remember. Then it was literally the pit. Was that what was blowing up in Neo Tokyo?
It's funny that you mentioned the pit because the thing I remember about the pit was they actually mentioned a city nearby to where Tim and I now live. It's called Roanoke in Virginia. And that's the first time I'd ever seen that city mentioned in a comic book.
That was the second time for me. Strike Force Moratorium #1.
Really?
Roanoke's the coast. But what's wild is a couple years ago when I was doing that thing where I was amazed how bad comics were getting, I was like, you're making the new universe look good. And now I have to call out my own hypocrisy because I've kept those books. DP7, Star Brand, there's things I like about those books. I got excited when Quasar went to the new universe and all this stuff. And I love how it's like starting to get sprinkled. The new universe has been popping up more and more like on Instagram with my feeds. I'm not saying there's a movement, but I'm saying it's like it's finding its way towards me and stuff. And the pit, and they blew up Pittsburgh because Jim Shooter left Marvel. So they blew up his hometown and destroyed it. And got the Star Brand off of his creation, if you will, so yeah.
I just realized I read my hometown mentioned in a comic once. And it was an old EC comic I had.
Oh.
I still have it. I forget, Crime Patrol or something. I have to look up what issue it is. But y'all know who Robert Moses is, the power broker?
Yeah, it's ringing a bell.
He was a famous guy in New York City who built all of the highways and the bridges and everything in like the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. And he was this real powerful guy. He controlled like I forget which one, the Tri-State Bridge Authority or something. And he was the one they blame a lot of the social problems in New York City on because he split up neighborhoods or whatever. But one of the things he did around here was that he also didn't believe in public transportation. So he neglected all the public transportation of New York City. And one of the things he also did, I'm on the west side of the Hudson River. And there used to be passenger train lines that ran up the west side of the Hudson River. There's still freight trains that run there, but when Robert Moses built the highways around New York City, they tore out the train lines. And so in some issue of EC Comics, before they tore out the train lines, the guy's on one of the trains going up the Hudson and happens to mention that he stopped at the Haverstraw train station. And I was like, oh, look at that, Haverstraw got mentioned in a comic book. That was the only time I've ever seen my hometown mentioned in a comic book, and it was an old EC comic.
Out here by the tunnels, when you are driving down 77 north or south at the West Virginia Virginia state line, and then it's a big long tunnel they drilled into a mountain, right? You come out the other side, and there's an exit for a place called Rocky Gap, which I can't even consider a town. Okay. So around 2008, Jeff Johns was on the Avengers, and I got home from work on a Friday, popped open my box of comics that came in, and I'm reading the Avengers, and there's a storm coming out. A storm outside for real. Big thunderstorm is hitting. And I'm reading the book, and as the storm gets a little bit stronger, and I'm turning the page, the Avengers are in Rocky Gap with Thor swinging stuff around. And I'm sitting here like, is this happening? I feel like it was like in a Twilight Zone episode. I was in the Never-Ending Story with the Avengers, and I'm like, I put the book down because this great big, right when I read where Thor did his big thing, yelling he was Thor, and the lightning bolt came down, a big lightning bolt cracked outside, and I'm like, I put the book down. I'm like, this is stupid. This is not happening. So, Rocky Gap of all places. I'm like, Jeff Johns or somebody's been on 77 and just saw the name. I think.
Do you remember the X-Files episode that started out in Pulaski?
I remember the one with Bruce Campbell where it's supposed to be shot in Roanoke, but they wouldn't turn off the Roanoke Star on the mountain, so they moved it somewhere else.
No, there was an X-Files episode that started out with a UFO hovering over a house, and it was in Pulaski.
Oh, nice. I've got 4 seasons of that on DVD. Maybe I'm going to start paying attention now.
Yeah, Downtown Haverstraw, I think, appeared in a couple of movies and TV shows because it looks old-timey if you dress it up right.
Gotcha.
Speaking of the connection between comic fans, it's a special moment to meet fans who got into comics around the same time and recall and relive the excitement of the big events of the era. It really matters. Like, I was just watching cartoonist Kayfabe, and they did a little something on what was a Hulk issue that what's his name? Sam Keith did a fill in it, which was really important to them because that they came into comics right around that time.
Really?
Sam Keith was like one of their first introductions to Sam Keith, and they really remember that issue as being special. And to me, it was just another comic I ignored.
Right.
Well, I'm glad you were eased into it because all I'm hearing is I'm old. If that's how they came into comics,
I knew by your reaction, Tim. I was going to say, said you realize it means we're old now, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's what it really matters. I mean,
yeah,
how excited you are about certain comics, it really matters when you started. Sure. I mean, it just does.
I mean, I get what they're saying. I totally get what they're saying. Like with me, off the top of my head, I'm thinking the Yesterday Quest out of Avengers. I think that's what it was called. Off the top of my head, it was the Quicksilver Silver Surfer story around the 170s in 1979. I was like 6, and that was one of the first books where I felt like it was my era. If that makes sense. I'm not reading my stepdad's books. This is now. So yeah.
Yeah, so and it's like, I don't want to rain on their parade and their excitement, but it really does matter because that book just isn't that exciting to me. But to them, that was a key book.
Sure.
But that all has to do with your age. That's really what that is.
Oh yeah. It just blows my mind that that's their era a little bit. What it is it's not going after them. It's like we're old, I'm like,
yeah. If we were 10 years old during that era, I probably would have been a McFarlane fan.
I'm thinking I was 15 years old and had already been reading comics for 11 years. No exaggeration. So I shouldn't be so hard on myself. You know, I'm like, you know, so.
One thing that helped with me was I got into Marvel between the ages of 6 and 8, but
Right.
The stuff that we were getting in the Brazilian comics, it was super compressed. They managed to compress about 12 years into those 3.
Huh.
So yeah, all of a sudden I know stuff about 1974, 77, 78, 80, 82, which were because the continuity was all over the place, and they were doing 3-part stories where they removed the flashback pages just to make sure they could cram 3 issues when normally only 2 would fit.
See, my comparison to that is those 100-page giants they had, like the 100-page giants that came out, the Superman family, the Batman family books, where they would have a Silver Age, Golden Age story, and just anything they crammed in there.
Not being a DC fan, I never got into those. But I know some of my friends really, you know, like you, loved them. But I just couldn't get in. You know, I just didn't buy any. I don't think.
Well, a lot of the books in the Bronze Age that the stepdad and them had, like I said, that I read, that's where I found the older stuff from the 40s. That's where I found Sandman from the 40s, right when Kirby and I know Joe Simon and Jack Kirby from Sandman before I knew him from Captain America. If that makes sense, you see what I'm saying? But I love those old books, those Forever People. The new, you know, Forever People had. That's where I found the Guardian, and that's where I found those old Kirby characters and stuff.
I only went back to the Silver Age really because I was a Marvel reader.
Yeah.
So they reprinted a lot of their Silver Age stuff that I read. And the only Golden Age stuff I read was the Submariner reprints and Invaders. And that was pretty much it.
Gotcha. Oh, the Invaders, I had those on the shelf. I love those Gil Kane covers, especially when Human Torch and Toro were on them, or Union Jack. I thought Union Jack was the coolest looking comic book character.
He had a great costume.
Yeah. He's speaking your language, Scott. He's mentioned Groot.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, absolutely. Sergio's a god.
I can still remember buying that Destroyer Duck with the first Gru in it. And it was just like a throwaway 6-page, however many pages it was. And I just laughed hysterically when I read it. Then they're like, oh, they were doing a Gru comic. I think it was a Gru miniseries first. I was all over that.
I was the guy that when I found Destroyer Duck #1, his first appearance in a dollar box, I was offended. I'm like, this is the first appearance of Gru. You know, I'm like,
you're not the only person that's seen a really good book in a dollar box. It's like, why is this here?
Yeah,
I actually bought that one off the shelf at my local comic. What year did that come out? It was probably 83, 84.
Something.
I'm thinking 82 off the top of my head.
Even that earlier? Okay. My local comic shop opened up in 81, so sometime after that.
I'm feeling 81, 82.
Yeah.
I've got the box. I've been labeling my boxes, and I think it's like right here on the bottom if I want to grab it now.
Mine's over there on the shelf, but
Yeah. I got an Akira. I'm only going to do one more. I'm getting old, but one more hike over here to the shelf, man.
I'll tell you a little Akira story. We used to have to paste up Akira in the bullpen. We'd get stats of the original art, and paste up is just the letterer would letter on vellum overlays. Vellum is like a tracing paper.
Right.
We'd have to take white out the backs of the tracing paper, and then glue the lettering down onto the pages, which is why when you see original art from the 90s, a lot of it has balloons pasted down to it, because that's what they did to make the process faster. That was our job in the bullpen. But so much of Akira was just them shouting their names at each other. So whenever we were pasting up Akira, we used to shout out Akira, Kaneda, Tetsuo to each other across the bullpen as we pasted down those balloons.
You see, when you find people you can do that with, other people. See, with me, it's people that can do that with Rocky Horror. Rocky, Scott, Dr.
Akira,
Scott.
Kaneda, Tetsuo, because that was half the dialogue.
That's hilarious. And as per usual, we're getting steered by the comments. So I think this is the most interactive live show you can watch on YouTube.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it. I got into comics 3 times, so I feel like I have 3 eras of discovery and excitement. 78 to 81, 85 to 89, 2004 to 2007.
Ah.
Some
So
of those
I was never one of those people who stopped reading comics. So I've just been going straight since I was 10 and before. Like I said, I consider myself, though I read comics before I was 10, I consider myself a collector from 10 on.
I'm the guy when I did basic training. We got that weekend off. I went back and I got the books. I found a comic book shop. That always I'd get the phone book out and I would buy up, 6 weeks worth of comics that I missed if it caught my eye. That's how I got the Golden Age by James.
I can remember when I was away in college, probably the same age you were away in military, and I still had my pull list at my local comic shop. So I'd come back from college and pick them up every month, 2-3 months. It depends. But I can remember, like, if I left my comics there for 2 months, it would be like a $75 bill for 2 months worth of comics. That was huge, like $50 to $75 for 2 months worth. And that's like a week's worth for people now, how expensive comics have gotten.
Right.
It's kind of crazy. Because, I was buying almost all indie stuff.
Yeah.
So, $75 worth of comics would probably be maybe 30 to 40 comics over 2 months. So it really wasn't a ton, but
early 90s. Is that when that was?
Mid 80s.
Mid 80s. Okay.
That's when indies were more expensive than Marvel and DC. Not like today when Marvel and DC is more expensive than indies.
Yeah, I've been having an urge to find Love and Rockets #1 just for shits and giggles, and then I looked on eBay, and I'm like, well, not today, sir, not today.
You know what I was just looking on eBay for no reason?
I've got a free Comic Book Day reprint here somewhere or something. I've got a reprint of #1. I love the cover to the first Love and Rockets.
I just had this Hulk 200. This is what I consider the comic that started my collection. I had Hulk my 200. I had comics, but my neighbor had Hulk 201, 202, and 203, and that's when I realized that when I was 9 that they all went in a row and made one big meta story. I hadn't really put that together before then, so I traded all the comics I had for those 3 issues, and that was the start of my collection. So I just happened to want to see this cover. I pulled it out. And for some reason, I got the hankering I was like, ooh, I have no CGC comics. I just don't have really that much interested in CGC. But I'm like, ooh, I wonder how much Hulk 200 CGC'd copy goes for, or whatever. I'm like, oh, I need one of those.
Right.
So I was looking up on eBay how much one went for, and the one I couldn't believe. They're really not very expensive. Hulk 200 isn't exactly a key issue.
But it's good. It's good.
Somebody had a CGC copy of Hulk 200 that was graded at a 2.5. Who sends in a 2.5 Hulk 200? Don't
People
you
with high
know
hopes.
that it's a really, really crappy? It's a 2.5. That's not like, I got a 7 and was expecting a 9. That's he wanted $60 for it too. I'm like, who's going to buy a 2.5 Hulk 200 for $60?
Nope.
I just couldn't believe that. That just made me go, I can't imagine. I want to know the sequence of events that led somebody to send a 2.5 Hulk 200 into CGC to be graded.
Yeah, I mean, all the pages are folded at the corners, and the cover is nothing but creases.
To anybody who knows the first thing about comics, that's a really low grade comic. A really low grade comic that nobody is not.
My
a key
guess
issue.
is in boxes when they were kids. And they're like, this is a 40-year-old book. I bet it's worth a lot of money. And they just somehow somebody didn't tell them to look up online how much it's worth. They just told them to get it CGC'd. And somebody made money off of him getting it CGC'd is what I'm guessing.
Oh, so you think there was a third party, and that might make the most sense.
Yes.
Because nobody is just going to nobody who's got a Hulk 2.5 and doesn't know what they're doing is going to pay CGC. I think you have to pay for your first 3 in advance or something too. You're right. It could have been Said, "Oh, if you want to throw that in with mine, it's only $30 to get it graded. If you want to get it graded." And
now, if anybody wants to correct me, I have no problem. Yeah, I have no problem. But I've understood that there's comic book shops that will perform the CGC.
Yes, there are.
Yeah,
it may have even been a buddy of his who wanted that extra book in to like make him above the limit for free shipping or something.
There you go.
that makes sense. That's because nobody who knows anything about CGC is sending in a Hulk 200 2.5. They're just not.
This is the stuff about the hobby that drives me nuts. The freaking parasites that come out there and make money off of it and stuff.
I'm looking at something here on eBay. It's not Young Blood. It's Teen Young Blood. Number two. 9.0. The guy wants $60 for it.
Well, didn't that have isn't that a new key issue that has somebody who just got a TV show in it? That's why that's there.
That was Youngblood number 2 with Profit.
He'd have
to. This is Teen Youngblood. It's not Youngblood. It's Teen Youngblood. It's the spinoff. Nobody knows who these characters are.
Someone's trying to slip one by someone then.
Probably.
He'd have to pay me $60 to take it off his hands.
At least it's a 9.0. It's not a 2.5. What's that? A 2.5?
Supreme Volume 2, number 4, $89.50.
And also the thing is, all right, here you have these books, but you can't read them anymore without breaking the seal. And it's like, what's the point?
Well, at least I know one of the guys at the comic shop I know, he buys CGC books, but he's a Thor fan, but he cracks them open.
Okay.
And he just buys them for the grade. He doesn't have to. He has to worry less about the grade. But I don't think most people crack them open, but he cracks them open. But I think it's for people who comic books are a commodity. It turns it.
Bloodstrike number 4. 9.6, $85. It's Bloodstrike number 4. It costs 25 cents.
No.
But if you're like
no.
There are people who, there's different ways to collect comics, and I always say
this doesn't make any sense. Trencher number 1. What the hell is Trencher?
Yeah.
Trencher was a Keith Giffen series.
He went around and collected souls that escaped. But the thing is a lot of people with CGC wants to have something unique. They want to have. That what makes it more collectible. Nobody else is to put Trencher out there. What they look for is a book that is either so rare, nobody in their right mind is going to send it to CGC because that stuff is tracked electronically somehow on a database or something. Anything they do, you can look up and see how many 9.8s of Trencher number 1 is out there. Not many.
My thought.
Besides people who are collectors, who don't really care to read the comic, they just want to own it. I think there's also people to whom it's like a craft project. You collect autographs, you get a CGC. To me, in my mind, it's like a craft project to them. It's something for them to do. They go to shows, they get it signed, they get it CGC'd, they get it cracked open, they get another signature, they get a CDC. So it's like their creative outlet almost.
One of the things that somebody brought up to me when the CGC stuff was starting is, let's say that you're really not into comics, but you like a character, or you had this one comic when you were a kid, and it's pricey. That number gives you a little bit more faith on exactly what you're buying on eBay after all the eBay disaster stories, you know. So I get that, and that's why they have a number. I think that numbering system was just to make it simple for people.
But as ETA Nick always says, look at that comic yourself too. You don't always have to trust the grade, because sometimes you might not agree with the grade.
And there for a while, I thought CGC was finally going to go down, because the videos are probably still up. You can still see exactly what year I was talking about. If the video, I'm a dinosaur on YouTube now thinking about this stuff. But people were showing you how to crack open. That's what you look up, how to open a graded comic. And people would show you how to open it. And all they would do is take that blue label, put it in the back of the comic book bag with the book, and put it up. That was a huge thing there for a while, you know.
Doesn't CGC they do non-encapsulated grading too now? I don't think I've seen any of those though.
Oh, I don't know.
It's like the really quick service where they just grade it quickly, put the label in a bag, one of the bags, and don't put it in a slab. Grimjack. I just reread Grimjack 1 through 22 and issue 43 and enjoyed them thoroughly.
Was there talk of Grimjack making it to a TV show or something?
I think so. That's why it made a blip on the speculator stuff recently. It may have gotten optioned, but option just means somebody bought an option to make it into a TV show. They rarely do get actually made. So.
Stan Sakai said once the option is the best place for the creator to be in.
You mean
because they're getting money. No, not Steve. Okay, because they're getting money, but whoever bought the option hasn't had a chance to screw their property up yet.
Well, what it is, I was just reading about this with Reed Fleming, the world's toughest milkman.
Milkman, right?
Which
that's a real book.
Yes.
Yeah, you never heard of Reed Fleming, the world's toughest milkman? From the 80s, an indie book. But that is in in the option vault. Because it was a really hot property in the late 80s. They were going to make a movie out of it with a lot of big names involved, but it never happened. And what happens with options is usually there's two different ways it goes. Usually you buy an option and it's not a ton of money. It's like someone pays you 10 grand for 2. It's like if you want to buy the option on Walt's Ragnarok, you pay Walter, I don't know, 10 or 20 grand, and for 2 years, you have the option to make a movie. If you haven't made a movie at the end of those 2 years, the option rights revert back to Walter.
Right.
But the other way it can happen is they can buy the rights outright, which usually costs 10 times as much, like 200 grand.
Yep.
Which is why it doesn't usually happen. But somebody bought the rights to Reed Fleming, World's Toughest Milkman, in like the late 80s. Outright, they bought them for like 200 grand. But then the project kind of died, and they changed heads of Sony so many times since then that Sony owns the rights to World's Toughest Milkman, but there's absolutely nobody there interested in making the movie. And there's nobody to buy the options from anymore. So it's like the movie is I think they were making a documentary on the making of it. I saw the trailer for the documentary or something.
Interesting.
So that's the other way. But most of the time you hear someone bought like the option for Grimjack. That just means they have 2 years to make a TV show or movie about Grimjack. And 2% of stuff that's optioned gets actually made.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend who used to buy Comic Scene just to keep up with what was being optioned. And there was there were these 2 pages where you see who had the rights to what, and it was this was in the mid-90s. They hadn't started making comic book movies yet, but there were like 200 properties in there which were optioned in development.
Sure.
That never got made.
Yeah.
There's a creator named, I think his first name is Jim, I think, but his last name is Ottaviani. And he runs a company called GT Labs, and their specialty is comic books about science. And he told a really funny story when he did a book that was called Bone Sharps and Thunder Lizards, which was about early excavations for dinosaur fossils, which is a really big deal way back in the day. Mm-hmm. And his property on that book was optioned by Steven Spielberg. Oh. And he just got a cold call one morning, and it's like, who is this? And it's like, it's Steven Spielberg. It's like, really?
Sure, it is.
The whole story is just funny. Listen, because he was just gobsmacked. It's like when it just came out of the blue. Yeah.
Who's your secretary? Hey, would you blow me?
Right. I can't do the story justice, but it was just funny.
I can imagine picking up the phone and Steven Spielberg's on the other end. Who'd believe it? It's like you're a fictional character, aren't you? You're not real.
Yeah.
At least not real in my life.
Okay, if you're going to prove it, what was E.T.'s middle name? He's like, I don't know. You know?
To this day, I still haven't seen E.T. Somehow, I never
Really?
watched one.
It's
Yeah.
on every streaming service ever right now. You have
Someday I'll have to watch it. It's only
wait.
been 40 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. One really interesting story about the sequel, or not the sequel, but the way ET was developed before it became a like a family-friendly sort of alien project. That the initial development was a lot different. It was a lot darker movie.
Yeah.
The E.T. I'm trying to think who the
E.T.
woman was. I've got E.T. on VHS. I thought I was going to pull it out on you, but the lady who wrote E.T., I think she was like Spielberg's wife at the time or something.
You mean the screenplay?
Yeah, the lady who actually wrote the E.T.
I have no idea.
Yeah, she was somebody's wife. So there's some interesting trivia behind it. So he had Einstein's eyes.
Melissa Matheson was who wrote it.
That name sounds familiar.
All I know is I kept seeing Cujo's, the lady from Cujo playing their mom, and I'm
she was
like,
married to Harrison Ford.
that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can't keep track of all these Hollywood marriages.
No.
Yeah, while Han was hanging out with Princess Leia, his wife was writing E.T. Go figure, you know. I like how they're all connected.
John Romita cover. I just started
Sal Buscema art in that one, if I remember right.
What was that? Yeah, Sal Buscema.
And
What were you thinking of?
I still have the actual comic. It's coverless. I was reading that in my house when I was in kindergarten. And if I remember right, the plot is you're inside the Hulk's head, so you get to see every villain ever that he ever fought.
Yes.
And then I think Doc Samson was in there trying to pull him out or something. It was great. It was a
Joe
fun comic.
Staten. I remember liking it a lot as a kid. This isn't my original copy. This is another copy I picked up all along. My original copy is battered all to hell, taped up, falling apart. All the villains keep showing up in his mind.
It's a 2.5, isn't it?
Yeah, mine might be lower than a 2.5.
Okay.
Might not raise to that level, but I also have a mint or a near mint condition copy of it. I have 3 copies of this Hulk 200 now these days.
Where I talk about this stuff all the time on YouTube, I've just taken a stack of comics, the ones that I kind of remember influenced me most as a kid. I just keep on the shelf to get. Your Hulk 200 is my Iron Man number 3.
Iron Man, is that an annual?
It's an annual. Oh yeah, excuse me. Iron Man annual number 3 with the Molecule Man. It's a Steve Gerber story. And there's the original beat up one. Man Thing, Molecule Man.
I'm going to go get my beat up one. Hold on.
Tim, what date was that one published?
1976. So I read this probably in 1978.
Because I remember Molecule Man showing up in the Micronauts series.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know if I wasn't a big Micronauts guy, but I read a couple. But this amazed me because it starts out with a bunch of kids on their bikes out in a swamp, and that was life back then. I was like, these are kids like me. Is how I remember reading it.
And then my original beat up one. Looks like the cover isn't quite on right.
And then this creepy things. Oh, go ahead.
On one staple there. That cover's just about all the way gone. I can see through it.
Wow.
All the big chunks out of it. There's tape on the cover holding it on. The inside's not so bad. But yeah, this is the original one that started my collection. It's lower than a 2.5.
And then a Charlton comic was one of the first books I read. This creepy things legitimately not only creeped me out, but when we played outside in the mud and by the river and all this stuff in this trailer park I lived in, I could smell this book. I always felt like I needed to take a bath after I read it.
Probably some of the first comics I read were definitely Charlton, because a lot of the military comics were out when I was a kid.
Like it's funny. I don't really remember the comics I read before this. I know I had them because I traded them all for this. And when I look back, I can remember some that I'm like, I think they came out a year before this one did. But this is where my memory for because, like I said, that's where. Well, not only did it hit me that the comics made up one big story, but issue 204 had Herb Trimpe. These are Sal Buscema issues. And 204 was like Herb Trimpe was back on for an issue. And it just blew my mind. I was like, why does the Hulk look so weird? I couldn't figure it out. And that's when I looked and discovered there were credits and there was people who drew this stuff. So, like, those two discoveries came really close together for me. So, and that's kind of what really sparked me.
Nice. Herbie was one of the first comics I read, and this thing was just disintegrated over the years. And I could not figure out, I was like, is this DC or Marvel? I mean, I knew DC and Marvel back then, but I was like, and there's like this thing called Charlton over here. But my 5-year-old mind got stuck on, who's making this? Little did I know this is like from 1963 or something, you know.
This is what I've been doing with disintegrating comics lately, drawing on them. This is one of them. This winter, my comic shop was getting rid of a bunch of comics because they couldn't sell them. I'm like, I can do some drawings on them. So this is some random issue of Judo Master.
Oh, I always loved Judo Master when I was a kid.
I'm going to draw some faces on them.
Awesome.
That's one of the things I've been doing. Drawing on comics. It is not easy to draw on newsprint from the 70s.
Did you ever get an old comic and then like you're flipping through it and then like some kid or whoever had filled out like an order form to mail order something?
I've got my shit or get off the pot comic. Are you kidding me? I did a video.
Yeah, Scott, the story I had is I've actually returned about 3 comic books since the 90s to people who did that.
Yeah.
But the one that really amazed me, there's a guy named Rod Boyd, and he owned a comic book shop in 94 in the Claypool Hill Mall.
Oh,
but he was also a teacher way back in the boonies, right? Mm-hmm. So I see him in 2001. In 1999 or 98, I was in Knoxville, and I found this superheroes catalog, and there was his address as a little kid wanting to order stuff from it. I was able to give it back to him. Blew my mind.
Oh, wow. That's funny.
Here's one someone gave me years ago. Someone colored in the Thor logo. And in the...
Of course they did. Why wouldn't they?
Is he froze up on you guys? Can you
see?
Yeah.
Here I sit hoping for bliss, but I can't piss. And the guy was practicing his signature, writing Wallace Brown Nose.
I feel bad because I'm so glad you can laugh about it now.
That is a personalized comic.
Yes.
It has a history. It belongs to a person.
Or get off the pot, Thor. Only me. Only me.
I'm so glad you're laughing about that because I think it was one of our first shows that I started laughing, sitting there going, Jared, that's been on beside somebody's toilet for a decade before you got it. We got off the air. I rewatched some of the show, listening to it while I did dishes, and I was like, "Oh, I'm an asshole." You know?
I think it's got more stuff written in here, but I can't quite read. I actually did a video on this a few years ago, but I love finding old comics with stupid things written on them.
All right.
Yeah.
Art-wise, what I've done is that this is sort of a cheat for me, right? I've had this Warlord. It's an upgrade in the original since I was 10. I always loved this cover. So this is actually one of the covers I can draw because of repetition over 30 years off and on every couple, every now and then. When I was a kid, I just drew it and redo it, traced it, tried to get it. So finally I had this burning desire and I gave a watercolor shot, and just so you can see it's not traced, it's a little bit bigger. But yeah, this was like about a 2.5 day endeavor at night. I know it's not going to show up, but it was a learning exercise. But what I've never said about one of the reasons I don't draw that much is I have arthritis in 2-3 of my fingers on my left hand, and we make jokes about my old crinkly up pinky there. So, but this was something I was obsessed just to get this out of my system. I would lay there at night and dream about painting it or something. So I just did it to get it out of my head.
But what I'm actually doing with this cover too is sometimes, like for my friend Ed or for Bob Wyachek, I rebuild the logos and trade letters. Sometimes Bob does. People pay Bob to do recreations of some of the covers he's inked, especially that Hulk Wolverine one with Hulk and Wolverine's claws. It does not have an unusual smell. Don't you worry. But I'm actually going to remake this logo and stuff. And I was digitally, I was repenciling it, basically tracing it, repenciling this whole thing. And then I'm going to just post it somewhere on the internet in case anyone wants to print it out and ink it themselves. They can do their own copy of Hulk 200.
Oh, that's awesome. You can start making grown-up coloring books,
Yeah,
and have them end up at Ollie's for $1.99.
Sleepy is also jealous that we have our original copies. Yep, some stuff I still have my original.
Yeah, you can color in the logo and write in.
We have get off the pot.
That's a restored 1.5. See, I would take Mind the Comics over CGC any day, to tell you the truth. That's all I need to hear.
See, I would send this in to CGC just as just as like a craft project sort of thing, just as fun. Imagine this one, slabbed. That would be fun. I wouldn't try to sell it on eBay afterwards.
Oh, I just had a great idea. I should get a issue of concrete and send it in just so I'd have a concrete slab.
Since Mind the Comics is here, I'm going to pick up something that he might remember, which is European comic book series that nobody cares about.
Hey, we care, man. We care. No. Oh, no. He's got us in suspense.
Isn't that the eye from Robot Spy in the Johnny Quest episode that's on Paulo's?
I'll never look at that the same again, ever.
Oh, I love that.
Robots in this. The monster or the man?
I got on Instagram. I was cataloging my comics, and I got around to the Johnny Quest books, and I ended up making a game of it because at first I'm like, you're here. I wanted to play around a little bit with Instagram. I was bored. And I had all my Johnny Quest books there, right? Little did I know when you hit that button, you have 60 seconds to record whatever you were doing. And it became a personal war to show every one of those damn books in 60 seconds. It paid off. It paid off. I've got like 300 views on Instagram. I mean, I was like, Quest.
Gotta be quick. Gotta be quick.
The Quest.
I love that there's still Johnny Quest fans out there.
Yeah, I remember. I bought that series in the 80s when it was coming out.
That actually how Tim and I met at a local comic book convention. We were both looking like a Johnny Quest figure.
Yeah.
Europeans met over issues of Johnny Quest.
Yeah, something like that.
Looking through boxes.
I remember you standing across the Salem show there. I remember seeing your shirt before I saw you. You had,
Yeah.
You had some kind of.
We call that a Johnny Quest meet cute.
Quest.
Yeah, Sleepy's been buying some back issues of Johnny Quest I saw in his videos. So
nice. It's a
no, it's Crossfire he was buying. Pardon me, the other one.
Okay. Johnny Quest is fun. If you're a fan, you're going to have fun with it. Some of the stuff they do, you might roll your eyes. It just depends on how big of a purist you are. But it's a fun book.
The Doug Wildley stuff is the best.
Yeah,
it is. Plus the covers that Dave Stevens did are fantastic too.
Yeah.
Sinkovich, Stevens, but and I'll shut up after this. But they had a mini series before the actual series where Doug Wadley took 3 episodes of Johnny Quest, and you got his director cut of it.
That was good stuff.
All right, Paulo, did you pull something out?
Yeah. Stuff that. The thing about European comics is that if the series stops being successful, it kind of falls down the memory hole. Right. So the books disappear; they don't get reprinted. And then sometimes I go look for old European comics. I can't buy the old Asterixes and Tintins. Everybody kept them, but they sell these ones. Like this is a series of short stories, which was first published in Spain by in the magazine called CIMOC, and it's an Argentinian writer, Jorge Zentner, and a Spanish artist from Barcelona, Ruben Pellejero, who is even though the guy's in his 70s, he did this like in 1983, but right now he's doing the Corto Maltese revival.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. Paul, if you don't care, can you hold that cover up? Because I absolutely love that cover. I love that. That is so. I know exactly what year that is. I just looked at that cover. It's like 1986. That's what it reminds me of.
And the thing about this comic, it's a series of short stories. The FM is about the theme. None of the stories connect. The only thing that they have in common is that something is going on in the radio that is important to the story. And sometimes it affects the main characters directly. Sometimes it's just something that's in the background. And all the characters who appear here on the cover appear in each of the short stories.
Gotcha.
Yeah, talking about everybody keeping their Tintins just reminded me of I had a friend who lived in Japan for a few years. And he told me how the way the Japanese do it with their comics is since they all have small apartments and can't keep a lot of stuff, they have comic stores where they have used volumes. So if you want to read a comic, you go to the comic store, you buy 26 volumes used of whatever book, you bring them home, however long it takes you to read your 26 volumes, and then you sell it back to the comic store. So that's just how they do it. Is like no one kept anything.
I heard about that because there's a place called Withful out. I don't know. It's not their library. I don't know who's doing it. Might be a little bookstore or something. I don't know who's doing it, but they actually have something that looks like a birdhouse with a glass door.
Yeah, it's called a little library.
Yeah. You just open it up, you bring it back, you fill something in, and it's been going for years. I don't know who these people are.
Speaking of, Tim, here's some trivia for you. Which science fiction author grew up in Withville?
I feel like
Henry Hill.
William Gibson.
Really?
Yep. He lived there when he was a teenager.
I believe
I tried to read a William Gibson book once and couldn't make it through it.
I'm thinking the same thing, but
they can be a little dense.
There was too much like slang in it for me. It was.
Yeah, if you're reading like one of the earlier cyberpunk novels, there's a hell of a lot of slang in those. There's a lot of slang in those. Yeah.
And I couldn't take it. Wow. Same with I was just rereading some Grendels, and one of them there was just future slang in, and I'm just like, I can't take this.
We've got another one here.
What do you got?
This series is art by Rosinski, a Polish artist who works in France, and who is more famous as the artist on the fantasy series Stargal. But this series fans just never made it. It has 5 albums stretched across a 15-year period, and it really didn't make it. I think we had 2 or 3 of these published in Portugal. Mm-hmm. It's a shame that this one didn't make it because the art is very, very good.
I love that you got it for €3.
Yeah.
That's what I'm impressed with.
See, here in the United States, they could have marketed a sequel to it and it had been called Franz.
And the thing at €3 now is cheaper than what it was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always said the comics I buy are like cars. They lose half their value as soon as I take them out of the shop.
Now, I've always seen Thorgal through the ages. Is it worth reading?
Yeah, most people think so. I actually never read it, and I'm trying to see if I can get complete Jean Van Am collection because I'm a fan. I now have a collection of all his 13 stories, and I'm building up a Largo Winch run. I also have the first 2 volumes of a series about the family of beer makers, which he wrote. but only those two were published in Portugal. I know the series is up to number 8 in France.
Gotcha.
Now, a terrible Western.
Uh-oh.
Manos Kelly. But
It looks like Blueberry.
No, but it's terrible. The thing is, the art is good, but the story is so out of whack. The guy doesn't know how to set up an action page, and then some things it takes 2 or 3 pages to do something that it takes 1 page, and on another one it completely misses out on the action. Yeah, everybody loves Rosinski. But this one, the thing, Manos Kelly was published in French by Humanoids, the company who published Mobius' stuff. So I don't know why they thought it was a good idea, because this sucks.
Humanoids hasn't had a good idea in a while. I'm just going to say that. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say.
Mm-hmm.
Humanoids kind of made some news, I think, last year, and my mouth dropped. But I was like, "What are they doing?"
Yeah, those Humanoids USA offices, they don't make any sense compared to the European output.
Right.
So, yeah. Here's another thing: barbarian comic, Tar the Rebel. Tar. This is actually,
Please tell me he's got a sidekick named Feather.
No, the artist is, I think, is Spanish, Brocal. The writer Claude Moliterni is known as a comics historian, but the people in the US, they've met him, they're not very impressed with his accuracy. This is okay. Yeah.
Oh, I dig that.
Yeah, it's good enough to go on Savage Sword of Conan if somebody was interested. But of course,
my first impression is almost like Joe Kubert inked by Kevin Nolan. Just that little flyby there.
The thing is, visually, this was very similar to visually, but not thematically. But this was similar to another series called Helheim, which was not barbarian. It was a prehistoric series set in prehistoric times. And it was a guy trying to understand the world before there was any sort of scientific knowledge. So it's sort of like Scooby-Doo without the ghosts and the caveman.
Love that. Tar and Feather, copyright Scott Connor.
Yes.
Barbarian comic I always wanted to be good, but it just wasn't. Iraq, Son of Thunder. I so much wanted that comic to be good, it just wasn't any good. Did you ever read that one?
I read Claudia and Conquered.
I have scans of Iraq, Son of Thunder. Yeah, I think maybe the whole historical angle made people uneasy because in Conan you could just mix stuff up.
I like history, so that was really up my. I was buying it when it first came out. And I'm a big fan of history and a big fan of comic books. So when that first came out in the early 80s, I was all over it. And it was just so... I think I bought 20 issues, the first 20 issues of it before I stopped. But it was just like so dull. I'm like, how did he make it so dull? And it had good talent on it. I think Roy Thomas was writing it. Ernie Colon was drawing it, maybe. Was that who was drawing it?
Yeah.
It was just, but man, I suffered through 20 issues of it before I finally gave up.
I think Torgal is set in the same time period as Iraq, Son of Thunder.
The only thing I learned from Iraq, Son of Thunder is they called China Cathay. That's all I remember about the whole thing.
Yeah.
Hey, Scott, I'm going to say this with all due respect because it's not the guy Roger that freaked me out. But
here it comes.
I'm trying to figure out how he got my phone number. He's been calling the whole time we've been doing this.
Oh, Roger Manning?
Yeah, but I didn't recognize the number. He's let me know that on the 22nd, the comic book convention is still going on in Salem. Hopes I can make it.
At the current time, it is. I don't know if that will remain to be seen.
I'm not
trying not to die.
Right.
For the amount of time I have to drive and the money to put into it, and finding out there's I think they said there was 12 vendors or something. I don't know if I want to.
Yeah, I love that show, but this is not a good time to be having it.
It's a great show, but but I'm trying to figure out how he got my phone number. That's what gets me. I don't give that out.
Are you in the phone book?
No.
My mind drifted back to 2.5. Who gets it slapped?
You get another barbarian comic here.
Jared, you brought up historical comics. Did you ever read anything by Jack Jackson?
Jack Jackson?
Yeah, his last name was spelled, I think, Jaxon, if I'm not mistaken.
I remember that name. I can't remember any comics he did.
Yeah, he did like historical comics, but they were usually published by like underground publishers.
I don't know. I remember his name. I don't think I've read much by him. Maybe in anthologies or stuff.
Right. I just wondered. Yeah.
Okay. What else is Paolo showing us?
So, Warrior of the Rainbow. The art is by Victor de la Fuente. I think he was part of the Selecciones Ilustradas studio who worked for magazines like Creepy in 1984. I'm not sure.
Okay, so they did a lot of work for the Jim Warren magazines.
Yeah. I think let's see if you can recognize the art.
Hold on, let me put you on solo. Keep that up. If we're going to be guessing some art here, is that looks like Mobius?
No,
it doesn't.
No, not Mobius.
Victor de la Fuente. The story is kind of more inspired on Robert E. Howard and Edgar Rice Burroughs concept, because there's aliens at the end and time travel, and it's sort of not Earth. He gets whisked to another place, which is not exactly another planet. It's sort of another dimension, but everybody's humanoid, the usual.
Right.
Nice.
And another one. This one is a Spanish comic. I love this series. Frank Cappa. This guy is usually a war reporter. So it's
that's what I was saying. I was about to yell out Robert. It's Jermaine Johnson.
Yeah. The writer artist Manfred Sommer is also is from Barcelona, in spite of his German name. And the thing, I know there's a huge omnibus with this entire series, but the Spanish publisher who put it out went out of business, and I don't know if I can buy it anymore. It is like 400 pages. In Portugal, we had about 6 or 7 of this character stories, because this book in here has 3 different stories, and they're in black and white.
What's the genre? What's the genre with that?
He's a war correspondent, so it's kind of Corto Maltese, but
what time frame does it take place?
Late 70s, early 80s.
Okay.
So it was supposed to be contemporary. One of the stories here is probably one of the best, which is The Last African. Well, it's covering a war in an unnamed African country, and one of the soldiers kidnaps him because he wants to use him to get out of the base where he's in and go back to his village from where he was whisked away. And that's why he's the last African, because he wants to go back to the village to do what he did before he was forced to become a soldier. And the soldiers who go after him for deserting, they're all like acting modern. Now we're a modern army, and we have guns, and we're supposed to keep the order. And that's where the idea comes from. The second story set in Brazil, and so it's the third one in the Amazon jungle. I like this.
But that FM book you showed is haunting me in my head. I'm sitting there like writing a story in my head where the radio is like an oracle, and it's playing, and to lead you around, it swings around the radio stations, finding lyrics to tell you where to go. It's got to find a song lyric.
It's making me think of Frank Miller.
Huh?
It's making me think of Frank Miller.
Yeah, like in Overstreet, you'd always see like FM, and it was Frank Miller's art. Right.
And I got it sent by Ruben Pellejero here.
Nice. I hope there's an American version of that somewhere.
There isn't. I know this was not published even in French, It may have been published in Italian because there was a similar magazine to Simoc called Scorpio, which was a version of the Argentinian magazine of the same name. But this type of stuff just doesn't get into the English language publishers. They have no idea it comes out.
Tim, we need to take a trip over to Portugal just to look at Paulo's collection, see all the stuff we've been missing out on over the years.
Yeah. There's a world of comics out there, and you guys are stuck in the little old United States, which are limited to superheroes.
That's all right. We have ambush bugs. So.
And I'm also sitting here like cussing my little shitty high school because I'm like, they didn't even teach good French. I didn't stand a chance to learn another language so I could read that.
I had 3 years of Spanish, and all I remember is verb conjugation.
I had 3 years of French, and I can ask you where is Sylvia? Is she at the library? That's about it. But in defense of the United States not knowing any languages, you have to travel a long way before you look at the first language.
Yeah, before you run into a foreigner. Yeah, that's exactly the problem with your country. It's
you two big oceans on either side of us.
Yeah, and then you have Canada, who speaks the same language, and Mexico, who you make speak the same language.
If they don't speak the same language, we get angry with them.
Well, all I can say is when I would interact with other cultures, it was usually at some bar, some seedier than others, and all they would teach you are the filthy words.
Whenever we had exchange student, that's the first thing that got taught were the curse words.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Did you guys see in this week's comic shop news? There's going to be an authorized Steve Ditko biography coming out.
Authorized,
but I mean, hold on 1 second.
But by the family, by the family.
Man, so much of that man's life is a mystery. I'm glad that this authorized thing is going to be interesting. I'm going to be very skeptical because I don't know how they would track what he did unless he kept a journal. I'm the first guy to be like, now wait a minute here.
Yeah, because Tom Scioli published his Jack Kirby biography in the form of a comic.
Yeah,
right.
I used to have him. He was one of the reasons I held on to Twitter because he would show a couple panels, if not a whole page, every now and then. I saw the page where Jack Kirby got fired by Stan Lee when they found out he was the one revamping Sandman at DC. They found out it was him, and they were like, "Well, you out of here."
Ditko Shrug is the name of it. Ditko Shrug, the uncompromising life of the artist. David Curie presents an in-depth biography of comics legend Steve Ditko, fully endorsed by the Ditko family. Much of this told in Ditko's words, taken from years of correspondence with Curie.
Okay.
Sounds interesting. The list price on it is $50. So
reminds me of an interesting parallel. There's a guy that owns a comic shop called Acme Comics in Greensboro, North Carolina. His name's John Hitchcock, and he's written a few different books on Alex Toth, and most of those come from correspondence he had directly with Alex. And he was at HeroesCon a couple years ago when William Stout was there, and I was talking to Bill, and John comes up and he plops down like 3 binders worth of just personal correspondence with Alex Toth, a lot of it illustrated. And he's showing this to Bill, and Bill's jaw hits the floor. And to impress somebody like that is pretty big. He's like, my God, you should publish this stuff. And he's like, he's just got reams and reams of stuff and he's published some of it, but maybe 10% at the most. So in theory, we've got this guy sitting on a gold mine of Alex Toth material that's still waiting to be published.
Look, a piece of my Hulk 200 fell off. Oh, well.
What blows my mind about the cons is if you're in the right place at the right time, you'll catch stuff like that nobody's ever going to know about. I was Charleston 66, and I talked to Bob Hall, and the longer you just let him talk, the more he was talking about how Valiant was changing when Acclaim bought him out and all this stuff. And this was some dirt from Bob Layton and stuff, like, whoa. Stuff like that just blows my mind how all this is just going to be lost. Nobody's documenting it and stuff. And that history you don't get to read on the on like Bleeding Cool and stuff. You know,
Well, that's the nice thing about YouTube now is you can record panel conversations at conventions or just interviews, things like that, and have this stuff preserved.
Well, they need to work on their freaking sound because I've tried to watch some of them from Heroes Con, Keith Giffen, and most of them, and things like that, and you can't hear them. It's the
Right.
Gotcha.
It sounds like one of Roger's 62950's videos. You know?
The problem with
lovingly, Roger, lovingly,
the problem with the sound in those conventions that the sound columns are not good in a good position for you to put your phone over them, because otherwise you'd be able to record the sound directly as it came out. But since it's usually stuck on the top of the ceiling, how do I get up there?
All right.
One of the most fascinating ones I had was Lee Weeks and Jose Garcia Lopez.
Oh, wow.
And Garcia Lopez was sitting there like, you could understand a lot of what he was saying, but somebody was there, kind of help him out, not in a bad, it wasn't horrible. He wrote bad, but he said his dream project was to do Conan, and he hates drawing Superman. And I'm sitting there like, will somebody get Marvel on the freaking phone or Dark Horse, whatever year it was?
Well, they're too busy sticking Conan in the Avengers to put a quality artist on there.
But can you imagine? Garcia Lopez on freaking Conan, man?
I can imagine that. That's what disappoints me.
It's going to make you feel like 1978. I'm serious. I mean, he's going to. Oh,
there's the problem right there. They don't want to sell comics. That feel like 1978.
Finally, Jared. Finally, you yes.
That's just crazy talk.
It would be interesting to have interviews with different artists, see what their dream project is.
Yeah.
When I was talking to Mark Schultz, he told me he can't really do it because of the rights, but his dream project was to do an illustrated version of King Kong. I was like, sign me up right now. I will give you Kickstarter money this instant, But it's a rights issue. So.
Oh, the thing I forgot is in that panel, Lee Weeks, and they did a gauntlet with Lee Weeks and Garcia Lopez. They picked 3 people out of the audience for each one to just name a character to have them draw. And then they gave away what they drew on the spot.
Oh,
and they had
terrible.
it to where you could see them drawing, injecting it. Okay.
Always fun.
Yeah.
But Garcia Lopez, man, on Conan. Somebody needs to make that call. I don't know what the deal is, man.
I'd buy that.
Some people like Sleepy Reader was buying some of that new Marvel Conan and liking it. Some of it. I heard some good things about it. Not the teaming. Well, actually, I heard the teaming up with the Avengers stuff was okay too. Not that it interested me.
Wouldn't
some people like
Avengers stuff with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, it's not so much liking it. It's that it came and went, and maybe they're still publishing out there, but hardly anybody.
The thing about those comics is that the people who are reading them, they are so unused to quality that anything that is L. Milgram level of writing sounds like genius nowadays.
He hit the nail on the head. Absolutely, they don't care. They want to buy it because it's Conan, and they don't care about the level of quality.
Yeah. I've said it before. It's like if you're in the desert and you're thirsty and you get thirsty enough, somebody hands you a cup of sand, you'll believe it's water. And that's what a lot of comics are today. I said it.
Because everybody says, "Oh, Donny Cates is an amazing writer," and it's competent. Like Al Milgram's writing. Al Milgram's writing was competent, but it was not exciting. And Donny Cates' writing is competent.
I found some Super Team Family where he did the covers for him last night when I was cataloging comics. I'm like, that's Milgram. I was like,
I think there's so much. There's so much history to comics now and so many have been done that writers are just in a bind. Mm-hmm. In terms of,
I wonder how many writers now know that history.
Well, no, it doesn't even matter if they know it or not. That's what I'm not. That's not what I'm talking about. And I'm also talking about too what I said before about the marketers being in charge of comics. Right. It's like almost like the writing almost doesn't matter at Marvel and DC. I mean, of course it matters because they need writers, but it almost doesn't matter if the writing is good or bad to the sales of the comics anymore, because the sales are always going to be bad until they find some gimmick to boost the sales up.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with the writing. So that like devalues the writing even more. It's a weird thing.
I miss the days where you read the comics and in your mind it was all about being creative. And the worst thing you ever heard was Superman's too hard to write. And then Alan Moore would pop up and write 3 classic Superman stories and all this stuff. And you were like, oh, you just need more creative people. And then
what it is, it's I don't even necessarily blame the writers or the creative people. It's the context in which they have to create. That's really hard.
Yeah, it's having it revealed what you're talking about. Like an innocence is gone. When
it's so corporate.
Yeah.
And it's so bigger. You imagine working for DC, who just got bought by AT&T, who makes billions of dollars. They're like, AT&T is like one of the biggest companies in the world.
Right.
Comic books are nothing to them.
Right.
No, if comic books disappeared tomorrow, AT&T wouldn't bat an eye.
Which is why last year whenever it was that sale went on, people were starting to say,
right.
Yeah.
And I'm perfectly convinced that it's going to happen. That Disney and AT&T are going to wake up. Why are we wasting time and energy on this thing that only generates, I don't know, let's $2 or $5 million a year or whatever.
It makes plenty of money as a business on its own.
Mm-hmm.
But
not publishing.
AT&T and Disney, especially when you think about, like I said, you're at DC, you're making the comics. The toy department is more important than you. Right. The movie department is more important than you. The TV show department is more important than you. And here you are making the comics that drive everything, and you're the least important part of the company. Imagine having to create in that context.
Yeah.
That's rough.
And I think that explains why some people look at it as a stepping stone onto other careers,
It's a constant stepping stone. If you were writing for comics, you'd much rather be writing for TV or movies. You'd get more, and that's what. And also in the last 20 years, comic book writers were devalued, and like TV and movie writers were valued more in comic. Like so many of the writers came out of TV and movies to write comics.
Sam Hamm, who did the Batman movies first when Tim Burton's movie, he wrote the script. He came in and did like 3 issues of Detective. They hyped it up a little bit. Some people bought it, and then it just disappeared as soon as it came. It wasn't that good. I mean,
and they want to use like writers' room TV models on comic books, which I don't think necessarily work that well.
Yeah.
And just the whole thing makes it really, really hard to make good mainstream superhero comics. Because especially when you think about good mainstream superhero comics from whatever era were made by such a small group of people. The reason Marvel Comics was able to take over the industry was because it was such a small group of creative people doing it. And even DC at the time, who was the 800-pound gorilla of the industry, really was, compared to today, was a fairly small group of people making those comics for DC in the 50s and 60s. And now there's just a huge group of people.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this. You got a lot of people who work at Marvel, but they're actually putting more effort into like their indie stuff. And he's talking about Lemire here, saying that he would take take a week to write his comic before I was doing a Marvel issue. I get Lemire, Hickman. There's 3 or 4 artists. I kind of mix them up in my head, but I don't think he's the only one that does that.
No. Well, also because I don't like a lot of these guys' Marvel stuff. Some of them, like I've liked some of Hickman's indie stuff, read some of his Marvel stuff and hated it. Warren Ellis, love his indie stuff, can't stand his Marvel stuff. And there's a few other guys like that who it's just like I read their Marvel stuff and it's just bland.
I just remember when the movies rights were really starting to affect the comics. They killed off Namor because Universal owned it instead of Disney. And then they were doing this thing where they were trying to detach Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch from Magneto because
so they can have.
I read that issue to see what they were doing. I mean, that's the Yesterday Quest where they found out Magneto was their dad. That's
right.
So I read that issue and I was like, this is horrible. Basically, it turned around. It was like anticlimactic. The High Evolutionary just looked at him and said, no, you two aren't mutants. You're experiments. And here's why. And he said, here's why you're a disappointment. And his computer read off some stuff. And one of it was because they had a caffeine addiction. And I'm like, what is this shit? You know, I'm like, a caffeine addiction. So you're a failure. That's why I've let you go. You whatever,
Caffeine.
I've been defending that the European publishers should license the Marvel and DC characters. And I got the numbers here. I found a place with the sales numbers for comics in France between 2000 and 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And they also have the magazines. Okay, now let's take into account that the population of France is 1/5 the population of the United States. So every number that I say, multiply by 5, and that would be the sales in the United States.
Right.
Best-selling magazine in France. Super Picsou Géant, which is it's a Disney magazine, giant Disney magazine, digest size, 200,000 copies average per month. So that'll be 1 million in the United States. That's the best selling. Second one, Le Trésor de Picsou, also another Donald Duck magazine, 160. Third, another Disney magazine, Picsou, the regular version, 140. Le Journal de Mickey, 130. And Mickey Parade Géant, 130. Then number 6 is an indie magazine, Fluide Glacial, 90,000. Can you imagine if you had an indie comics magazine in the United States selling 450,000 per month?
Wow.
They retire after 3 books. That's what
Yeah. Where do we find the superheroes? Best-selling Ultimate Spider-Man, 50,000. It would still sell 250
right
in the US. Maybe let's take into account that superheroes sell more than Disney into the United States, and maybe those numbers aren't as accurate.
Right.
But you can extrapolate from it.
Yeah. Still 250.
Is Ultimate Spider-Man still a title?
It was in 2016. Might not be nowadays. They changed the titles according to.
Miles Morales has his own book, though, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's called Ultimate Spider-Man. It's amazing. I have no idea. Books come and go so frequently that I don't even know.
Funny you called it amazing.
And these are the magazines. Top selling DC. Batman, 20,870. So it would be something like 110 and 15.
See, I'm trying to be careful here because I don't want to turn this into like one great big huge bashing video. I mean, there's enough of that out there, you know what I mean? But the reality is right in front of you. You know what I mean? Like for anybody to see. Scott and I went and watched Iron Maiden a couple years ago, and I think there was like 18,000 people there. That was the average number of people buying a Marvel comic, if you believe the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at that, and I'm like, so as big as America is, 325 million people, this is how many people are buying Marvel comics.
Sometimes I look at the numbers of comic sales, and it just makes me ill. It just makes me go, oh my god.
But nothing's wrong, Jared. Nothing's wrong,
Well, nothing's wrong with their prices. That's just, once again, the marketing people are running it. What does it matter if you're selling? What does it matter to the people who count the bottom line? Right. If you're selling a $4 comic to 50,000 people, or if you're selling a $1 comic to 200,000 people, it's the same profit. Now, you and I know that.
Well, I had a little bit.
Having your circulation go from 200,000 to 50,000 is no recipe for success. But being that the price went up, to them, they're all geniuses for figuring out how to make money. That's the crazy thing. That's what happens when the marketers are in charge.
What they should be looking at is the genius that is doing Scholastic, and Raina Telgemeier's books are selling in the millions.
Yeah.
They are, but
Reminder comics.
but there's no recipe for that.
Yeah,
that's just
there should be. They need to look and figure out how they're accomplishing that.
They should, and they're trying. They've been putting out books in that same category for a while. DC has, and I know Marvel has too. They were doing it long before Raina Telgemeier was putting out those digest size, and a lot of that stuff is going to libraries too.
Right,
those big circulation numbers. But like I said, if there was a recipe, they'd do it. But
here's the recipe that kind of came out. And if I'm getting this wrong, I'm going by how Marvel was putting things out when it came to Axel Alonso getting fired. Okay, around that time. But basically, what they were doing is the reason we were getting so many new number ones and so many series not lasting a year is they figured out the quarterly reports. And what they were doing is they were timing these number ones and things that they knew people would buy, knowing full well that sales would drop after that for the quarterly reports. So when the quarterly reports would come out, it looked like they were making money, and it was just a steady slide down. Somebody woke up finally. And that's why you were getting so many number ones. And
no, you're still getting all those number ones. You're getting more. Matter of fact, now they figured out to make the number ones $6, $7, $8.
Yeah. But this was also while they were talking about one event happening now, and they were already talking about the next one, making you think this one didn't matter, which it didn't. They were planning their quarterlies.
I know. But as much as people complain about event books, they're the best-selling ones. You know, people complain the most about them and buy them the most. So it's kind of like, what are they going to do? They're going to put out more event because it's being driven by the marketers. They're going to put out, if event books sell, they're going to put out more event books.
Now we're getting back to what can we do now versus having a long-term goal. You know what I mean? Like how
there is no long-term thinking. That's not how business works. That's the problem.
Yeah, it's gone.
And like I said, when you're not being driven by the creative people, it's just going to be driven by marketing from now on, and it's just going to deteriorate. There's no way. It's like, can you even think back to the 90s? Late 80s, early 90s, Rob Liefeld, McFarlane, Jim Lee, Eric Larson, all those hot artists in the 90s who like drove sales, even if they weren't the only force driving the sales. There was other things. Can you even imagine that happening now?
Oh, no.
Can you imagine all of a sudden there's 4 or 5 hot artists driving sales? That like doesn't even happen. It's like not even a thought to anyone in the industry. Because I can remember in those early 90s, every single editor was searching for the next hot artist.
Yeah,
that's how Stephen Platt got his job. You know, he was probably the last of the hot artists and he was only hot briefly. And the editors couldn't wait to get their hands on some young hot artist because they got royalties for that.
Right. So if we think about now, you know how do you feel about crowdfunding? Steve Paluto, I think it's his name, off the top of my head. Yeah,
the guy does Lady Death.
Yeah, he does crowdfunding, and he's making a fortune.
Crowdfunding is fine, but once again, crowdfunding is for people who already have fans.
Right. Not only do they already have fans, but they're supporting a book and sticking around and coming back over and over.
That's like somebody once said, I can't remember, it was years ago, that this was 20 years ago. Someone said this when comics were even healthier than they are now, but weren't healthy. It said something about the most stable part of the market is the writer the sort of indie writer artist who has 10,000 fans who buy his stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what crowdfunding has made even easier.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people go straight to Ethan Van Sciver because of his YouTube channel. We talked about that before, but there's guys like Dan Barrington, Steve Brew doing a sketchbook. And people were doing it before Ethan Van Sciver and stuff. And I'm just kind of, I mean, I think 2-3 years ago, I did a video where I'm saying, I wonder if this is going to be a future market. Like, could this be something? If there's just some way to get to people out there to know that this is an alternative that doesn't hang out on YouTube.
It's a good market for people. It's a good market for people who are artists who are already established, but it's not good for the casual buyer. It's more expensive than other comics. You have to, I mean, if you think you have to be a comics fan to walk into a comic shop, you really have to already be a comics fan to buy something from Indiegogo or Kickstarter. I mean, you have to be.
That's why they have all those YouTube shows. The thing is, you're not a comics artist. You're a YouTuber who makes comics on the side.
Right. But you really have. I think Kickstarter and Indiegogo are great for guys like that.
Yeah.
For like Brian Polito, who does Lady Di. I mean, it really makes life easier for him. But for the 22-year-old artist starting out,
Right.
Pluto is one of those guys that to me is sort of like an underdog after he lost a lot of rights to a lot of his creations, and to see him coming this far and be doing that well, you're just sort of like, that's one for the
just imagine when he was going through that bankruptcy stuff, if he had Kickstarter then, he probably wouldn't have been going through it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a story I wish somebody would tell. I mean, one for the good guy. A good guy won. You get what I'm saying? Like,
Kickstarter related story. Dave Sims had a Kickstarter, and for whatever reason, he's not going to finish it, and he's asking people not to ask for their money back.
I think Dave Sims is just a terrible marketer.
He's got a few problems. I'll put it to you that
First of all, he's a Luddite. He refuses to use a computer most of the time. He's got a YouTube channel where he updates somebody, but everybody does all of his computer stuff for him. He's not on email.
He still uses a fax. Everybody says it freaks him out.
I mean, if Dave Sim were tech savvy, he could probably could still draw, didn't have his wrist problems. He could still probably be much more successful than he is, but he's just not.
Well,
because you have to be pretty social media savvy to be doing Kickstarters and stuff like that.
Sure.
But Dave Sims said something which makes sense now. He put out a comment somewhere. I don't know if it was on his YouTube channel or what it was, where he said he's finally figured out he's just always going to be the Cerebus guy. And I'm not quoting him direct. I mean, it was something.
I'll quote him directly. He said he's come to the realization that he'll always be a nostalgia act. That's what he said on his YouTube channel, because he wanted to do what is it? The Strange Life of Alex Raymond. He wanted to put that out. He had another guy drawing it for him since he can't draw, and but he's so. I love The Strange Life of Alex Raymond.
Yeah, that's the one project I wanted to see him do.
I bought it when he was doing Glamour Puss. Yes. I bought all of Glamour Puss, and half of Glamour Puss was terrible, and half of it was The Strange Life of Alex Raymond, and I loved it. Right. It was not only was it history, it was comic book history.
Right.
But now it's never going to get finished.
Now it's never going to get finished, and he did. Like I said, I watch his videos every week. He was doing a test Kickstarter only in California at one store, to blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, what? And and I'm like, I want this book. How come I can't get it? I mean, it's just, that's sad. I would find that. Yeah, I love the it's not even a book right now. Actually, the guys who did the work on it might be going forward with it and putting out what they have so far. But I just think Sim is just such a terrible social media person.
Yeah, I mean,
get it together.
I hung in with his YouTube channel for as long as I could, but there's so much about him now, and I'm sure there's a path that got him there, but he really comes off like a self-defeatist before he even really gets started.
Yeah, he's
like one little bump, and he's like, "That's it," you know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right.
I mean, I can understand. I mean, I'm still like, me and 18 other people are buying the Cerebus and Hell stuff. That's it. I'm still getting that stuff. I enjoy it, but
I tried to hang in there, man. It's 17.
I understand. He knew how to do it in 1978. He was good at it in 1978. The work spoke for himself. The path was easy.
Well,
sent comics to Diamond. Then went to the comic shops. People bought them.
Well, let me throw out the dynamics here, because when he said that, think about it. The guy self-published. The guy did it on his own, had his own little company, his own little stable, but he did that from 1977 to what? 2003?
30 years it took him,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, by staying in his little bubble and every now and then, doing something with the Turtles, that Spawn issue.
Right.
You do something for 30 years your way, you can't adapt when you come out.
Then add his hand troubles where he can't draw now.
And he has no idea what those troubles are. You all right, Paulo, man? You all right? Okay.
Still awake.
Okay.
Yes, I just...
Yeah, one thing I talked about...
Shop tours, too, in the 80s.
What'd you say, Paulo?
One thing, when Dennis Kitchen was here for the Will Eisner 100th year anniversary exhibit, I talked to him a little bit for a while, and the idea is that he was the only guy in the indies who was business savvy enough to know how to adapt these things to what the market required. Right. And most of the other guys saw themselves as artists first, and the more they got into what they were doing, the harder it would be for them to do anything else, especially if they were forced because of money issues to go work for somebody else. That's why some of them ended up disappearing. I mean, Jack Katz used to work for the regular publishers in the 50s, and in the 70s he was just doing First Kingdom.
Right.
And all these other guys, Crump obviously isn't making any money. I don't know how he's making money but it's not from comics.
When you think about how much work it is to draw, I don't know if you guys know how much work it is to draw a comic. It's a lot of freaking work. So if you're drawing a comic all day, you don't have time to do all the other jobs you might need to do to promote your comic and such.
Yeah, I used to hear about artists having assistants going, what? What does that mean?
The real successful ones did. Your average guy didn't. But that's also why Sim had to get Gerhard.
Yeah.
Because the art got more complicated and he just couldn't do it all. So he got Gerhard to do the backgrounds.
Gerhard did a piece in this also. I'm sorry.
Gotcha.
Sorry, man. You said Gerhard, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. But Gerhard.
The comic strip guys used to have assistants at the wazoo because they were.
They had multiple assistants usually each.
Yeah,
I've heard stories about Chaikin being a heavy smoker and drinker back in the 80s, and when he got a assistant at some point, he didn't know you could do that, and then didn't know what to do with them. That's where I started hearing about artists having assistants. I'm like, they have what?
I mean, Jim Davis, the guy who does Garfield.
Yeah.
Well,
supposedly, from what I've read, is just about everything Garfield now. Jim just signs his name on it, but other people.
Other people do stuff.
There's a video somewhere showing how they make a Garfield strip now, and it gets passed around to like 4 people, and they treat it like they don't even touch the panel. They get like gloves and they pass it around, and
a lot of it's on the computer too. It's like
blew my mind.
Jim does like a little sketch maybe, and Cerebus not appealed to this generation of comic readers, nor those who admire his. Yeah, I don't know how much Cerebus will appeal to younger people. It's a tough call.
He made an Oscar Wilde a character in Cerebus.
Right.
Okay, Oscar Wilde. Oh man, I think I'm I'm hoping I'm thinking of the right artist. I'm getting punch drunk. It's a Friday after a week of work. But Oscar Wilde was one of those authors who survived because people would find his work and it kind of grew from there.
Right.
I would like to hope that there's an irony that's what happens to Cerebus, at least the first 200 issues. Somewhere along the line, for some odd reason, some people in future generation finds it, picks it up, and they're like, what is this? And then they start finding meaning that was unintended because of their era that they're reading it in. You know what I mean? Like Moby Dick. People start picking up the symbolism later, because when it comes to comics, I consider Cerebus the Moby Dick of this genre, That's a hope.
One of my favorite comic strip stories. I think I heard this one way back when I was in school from one of my teachers who knew, I think it was Johnny Hart, the guy who does DC
and Wizard of Id.
And Wizard of Id. He said Johnny Hart used to, his assistant was his longtime buddy, like a guy he grew up with. And they worked in an old theater up on stage, like an old empty theater. They had their desks up on the stage. And like one day, I don't know, they flip a coin for it or whatever. And the one of them would have to go down into the basement where the kitchen was and make them drinks. And then there was a dumbwaiter, and they'd put the drinks in the dumbwaiter, send the drinks up, walk back upstairs, get the drink, and then they'd just be drinking and working on their comic strips all day.
That's the way to work.
I think it was during American Flag was the first time that Chaikin had to do a monthly book. You know what I mean?
Right.
Out of a company out of Ohio at the time, and he was kind of skeptical. So I don't know if people can actually remember what the 80s were like, but there was fun things that happened, like what you're talking about, like the dumbwaiter and what were you going to do and odd stuff. So it sounds to me like it was just a fun time to be working in something like this. But you know what I mean?
Yeah,
right. In the golden age of the comic strip with all like the adventure strips in like the 30s.
Yeah.
And some of those guys like Alex Raymond used to have nude models over.
Yeah.
I've got a magazine. I'm not joking. I got a magazine here somewhere where some comic book artist in the 50s has her right there with a big sheet on a chair
I think
behind her.
that's shot at Alex Raymond.
Alex Raymond and Hal Foster were making some pretty serious money back then too.
Oh yeah, they were rich as all get go.
Yeah, you see like pictures of their houses or their studios, and it's like,
right.
Yeah, they've got a few bucks to throw around.
All in Westport.
Hal Foster had a reputation for being an asshole.
Who was it?
No, Hal Foster was well liked by most people. No, Hal Foster was actually well liked by most people that knew him.
All right, we got the comments going off here. I'm just going to kind of,
And the size of the original art was huge too.
Right.
Yeah.
And Sleepy Reader, I know some people who worked in continuity studios in the 70s, and they liked it.
Yeah.
He said, I wonder if it was fun working with Neil Adams and the crusty bung. Yeah. Almost everybody I know who worked, like Bob Wyachek, I think, was in there for a little while. Jack Abel was in the 70s, and Neil Adams. Almost everybody liked being there.
Yeah. Matthew Rask, are you talking about Earth 2 by Grant Morrison? It's a hardback with Frank Quitely, just out of curiosity. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I was very late to Cerebus. It was one of those I always meant to pick up, but I didn't until the mid-90s. Yeah, everybody says it was fun working in Neil Adams' studio in the 70s. And some people would just like rent a table at the studio too. They weren't even in continuity studios. They'd just be renting a table at continuity studios for a while.
I've heard stories of people like David Lapham. They would just start showing up at studios or companies till they got to work. And they were like, okay, if this guy's going to keep showing up, we'll just put him on a book. And that's how David Lapham supposedly got into Valiant Comics. I can imagine in the 70s, if you're lucky enough to find these places, that's exactly what I would do.
In the early days of Valiant, they were looking for people, I remember. They were looking for people who could letter and color because they were all brand new.
Right.
Yeah, well, you could do that. You could do that then. Nowadays, you can just show up at the door.
Yeah.
Even if they're in a bind, they won't have you.
Right.
Mike Royer was here for the same year that we have the Eisner exhibit. There was also the Kirby 100th anniversary exhibit. So my LCS got in touch with the Kirby Museum, and they helped bring Mike Royer over as well. Royer said in his panel that he thought about traveling around Europe and seeing if we could work as an assistant for all the great French artists. But then he said, but I ended up not doing it because I didn't want to impose on them. And it was only years later that he told that story to somebody else. Why didn't you idiot? They would have said yes.
Sometimes you come up with an idea and you just can't follow through.
Mm-hmm. He ended up doing logo designs at Disney.
Yeah.
Man,
But the guy
the
still
stuff that used
has
to go
fun.
on in the old days, you couldn't get away with nowadays too. Like just the stuff that used to go on in the '90s bullpen, just us having fun.
Right. I'm not sure you could create the continuity studios nowadays because nobody knows what that word actually means anymore.
Yeah, and what was the name? Upstart Studios. That was the one that Walt Simonson and who else was there? Walter and Chaikin. I think Frank Miller was there for a while. That was another. They just shared a studio that they called Upstart Studios in like the late 70s in New York.
I didn't know about that one. I know there's some other studios that are around. There was one out in California that had Bill Stout and Paul Chadwick and a couple other guys. I can't remember. I think Dave Stevens might have been part of that too.
Rob Liefeld just posted a picture from his Extreme Studio days. He had a lot of people working for him there. There was like 30 people. They were making cash.
I've been listening to some of his podcasts, and they're quite interesting. They're mostly about his teenage days.
Oh, but Rob's Simulations? Yeah, I haven't listened to that yet, but I've heard.
Sometimes he talks about the Extreme Studios, and I wanted to make sure everybody made money.
Yeah,
that was he said.
But could you imagine like Image Comics even happening now? It couldn't because there's no hot artists.
Not in the States, no.
No, I mean, if Image Comics could happen now, they could just go to Image Comics, kind of thing. Like, if there was a 24-year-old Rob Liefeld right now, he wouldn't even have to start Image Comics. He could just go to Image Comics and make. And if he was selling 1 million comics, would be making tons and tons of money. But that just doesn't exist anymore. It's amazing to me how I can't even comprehend it existing anymore. It was such a special time and place that happened, where you had this talent combined with this interest in comics, and I don't know what it was exactly, and good marketing.
Yeah, see, that same situation, even if you'd had artists like that would have happened, say, like maybe in the 50s or the 60s, would have happened back then either.
No, it couldn't have happened back then.
Right.
There wasn't things. It was just getting easier to make comics digitally then.
Yeah, they just happened to be at the right place at the right time.
Yeah. I don't want to downplay their talent because that had a lot to do with it. But the right place at the right time, circumstance had a lot to do with it too.
No.
Part of me wishes they were running. Periscope Studios here in Portland, but I don't know. Yeah, a lot of times the studios are just a bunch of artists rent studio space together and call it something. It's weird not to have hot artists in comics. It really is to me. It's weird to me that I can't really name Marvel and DC. I mean, there's not only not hot artists, I can't name them, and part of it has to do with the fact that a lot of them are foreigners.
A lot of it has to do. I'm going to go with Jim Steranko on this. Jim Steranko put out on Twitter like a couple months ago. He said, "Why go to Marvel work for peanuts?" He said that's exactly why they, ship these, send it overseas to get worked on and stuff.
Right.
Even though I don't really, buy mainstream superhero stuff anymore, the creators I can name now that are working now are not artists; they're writers.
That's because that's who they promote. But when you think one of the
They
reasons
don't even
they're
promote the writers.
What was that?
They don't even promote the writers. They just mention that the writers are there.
But the writers do more of the interviews.
Yeah.
The writers have the time to go out and talk about the comics. The artists are busy at home, or the artists are like in Croatia.
The thing that gets me is, and anything that's happened in the last 5 years, I have zero problem with somebody popping in saying you're getting it wrong. So if I say this wrong, no problem. But it seems like it was CB Sabowski or somebody put out the reason they're not promoting hot artists. They don't want hot artists and all this stuff. I mean, they just came out and said it, and they gave crappy reason.
Image. I literally heard after the Image guys left, forget who it was, and they say we're never promoting artists again. That's what they said in 1992.
There was some artist promotion during the Heroes Return.
There was, because that came from people above them. The Heroes Return deal was made above the level of editorial creative. That was like one vice president's deal who then left. In 1990, most of the best comics had been done a few years before in the Batman. Well, also, like I said, the part of what made all those Image Comics guys hot was that they were all they all knew each other. They were all competing with each other. They were all, which made them bond and be able to, but it was like, one would see the cool way one of them was doing webbing and do his own take on it. The other would see the cool way someone was drawing Venom's tongue and do his own take on it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, with artists finding the cheapest artists they can in foreign countries, there's no hope for that type of camaraderie and bonding.
Let's remind people how they promoted artists back then, because he's got a question mark like, was that 87? It was 89. They promoted artists in a way that Stan Lee had a series of VHS tapes come out, I think.
Yeah. I remember those.
And each one was an artist spotlight. There's a video of him out there where he's got Jack Davis. He's got one with Rob Liefeld, and they're on YouTube. I'm pretty sure that's where I've seen them.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of
them. I think at that time, Fabian Nicieza was in charge of Marvel's promotions and also writing some of Marvel's books with Rob Liefeld on art. And so it's like he'd promote his own books.
The other thing is,
why not?
And I think Stan Lee had an infamous episode from that series of videos. I hope it's Jack Davis. I know it was one of those famous he treated him horrible in that freaking video. He would tell Jack Davis what to draw, and Jack Davis draws by getting real close and getting down like this. And Stan Lee was like, "What are you doing? Get back up! I'm not." And it was I was watching that, and I'm like, I was watching that like in 2014 or 15, going that.
Rob Liefeld got in a national TV commercial
for Levi's.
Yeah.
Imagine that now.
And
who would they put on that TV commercial?
Nobody.
A better artist than Rob Liefeld.
Like I said, even if you're not a Rob Liefeld fan,
I'm not.
I'm not. I'm actually more of a fan of Rob as a social media presence than I am of his artwork.
Right. I have nothing against him personally. I don't like his artwork.
Those guys had something. A lot of it was circumstance. Mm-hmm. But some of it was. They had something special going on.
Yeah. What was it? 501 Button Fly
501
made Rob. Yeah. That's when Rob blew up.
And there's
Button Fly for a white guy.
And there's just nothing. That just can't happen now. And I think that's bad for comics.
It is.
It was. So
do you remember when? Who was it? I can't remember the name of the creator. I can see his face plain as day. When they appeared in some Dewar's whiskey advertisements in print.
No idea.
Yeah, it's.
Can you imagine if they had
I can't remember who it was now.
4 or 5 young 25-year-old comic book artists who became social media superstars. How good would that be for comics in general?
Who
It'd
knows?
be great,
Yeah.
but
It
it's
would-
just
It would inspire a whole new generation of people who want to work in comics.
yeah. But it's
Paulo, what were you about to say? I thought you were about to say something.
Forgot. Will come to me.
Okay.
oh yeah, that the culminate right. All those guys becoming superstars would be the culmination of Stan giving artists credits, and yeah. And then Marvel decided it was a bad idea to do that. So
Y'all give up.
I think it wouldn't be so bad for the publishers not to talk about the writers and artists if they knew how to promote their own brands, and they don't even know how to do that.
Yeah,
they're not promoting their own brands, and when they they do these events. I mean, this is Empire, and this is Planet Venom or whatever it is that's calling. And the other one is War of the Realms. And okay, why are you promoting Empire and War of the Realms and you're not promoting Spider-Man and X-Men and Avengers and Daredevil? Those are the brands, not Empire.
I'll say the problem with them not promoting their brands is their brands always was their talent. When you think of when mainstream superhero fans think of their favorite comics, what do they think of? Runs.
Yeah.
Any mainstream superhero fan, what's the big question is what's your favorite run? Not
There's
it doesn't
a degree of importance on where you work, and although the characters may go up and down, that pyramid exists no matter which you're in. So there will always be somebody who wants to work on the X-Men and somebody who wants to work on Spider-Man, and they don't. Oh, I want to come up with my own event with a brand that will be forgotten by next year because there will be a new event.
Batman is important, but Frank Miller's Batman is more important.
I'll tell you, in my house in the 70s with the uncle and stepdad, people I keep bringing it up and stuff, Jack Kirby was the biggest star as John Wayne. You know what I mean? Clint Eastwood. Jack Kirby was talked about around me by the stepdad and his friends, college kids. And these are guys in their early 20s, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something definitely missing that was always there until the last 20 years.
Well,
you know,
one thing back then too, you didn't have the audience fragmentation that you have these days.
But the audience fragmentation is because there's so many more comics.
Well, not only so more comics, but so many other ways to get entertainment.
Well, that's true also, but still, the other ways to get entertainment are driven by talent.
Right. I just don't think you have as many common touchstones these days as you had back then.
You don't, but I think that makes the talent even more important, not less important.
See,
I agree with you. It should be.
Typically made the talent less important to, I think, the detriment of comics.
I agree.
It's almost like we can't crack the code. We got a whole bunch of numbers for a combination. You know what I mean? And like we're like right there. If we just had that one more piece, we could just like bottom line it. And that's one of the things that drives me nuts, is why I think as comic book readers, as I feel like we're all being now, is what we're trying to, you know, we're trying to say something, but there's something definitely missing that was more organic, that was built by a fan base.
The companies were smaller,
yeah,
and most interested in comics.
Yeah, there was
now the companies are part of a huge conglomeration, and movies and toys have taken over to such an extent that the comics are a minor part of their own business.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I'm thinking about it out loud as we're talking. You know, there's no bottom line here, but there's a big piece, and it's probably this marketing thing we're talking about, but like there's a big piece of the hobby that organically happened on its own. You had happy accidents, Wolverine, Punisher, breakout stars that were just minor characters, names of comic book artists who it was their work that made people fans. I mean, that was Neil Adams and Steranko. You know what I mean?
Wolverine was a breakout star because of Claremont. And
there was an organic thing where the fans would make, again, conglomerately. You know, all the fans read the same book, same guy in California reading the same book over in Virginia, over here and there, and everybody would read those comics, and the letters would come in, and the sales would go up on certain books. They would find out there was an organic, way that comics moved forward. If that makes any sense.
But that's actually even easier now with social media to get word of mouth out.
Should be, yeah.
But no one's excited about the comics.
Right. They I've seen these comic book editors, pros, everybody, Joe Quesada and stuff saying stuff like, this is the best time to be collecting comics. Look at the paper quality and the coloring and what techniques and all this stuff. They're missing the story.
Right.
Alice Cooper, there's a movie called The Decline of the Western Civilization where all these bands are trying to pop up and make it, and they came off looking like idiots. And then you had Alice Cooper saying, yeah, this guy shows me his gimmick, but I'm like, where's the song? And that's kind of what I'm getting at with the comics and stuff. Where's the great runs now? Where's the great stories? 40 years later, and we still talk about the Dark Phoenix saga. 40 years later, think about that.
The Watchmen,
35 years, 34, 34 years later, Watchmen. Yeah, exactly. Sandman started in 1988, all over the place now.
What was the last great run from Marvel or DC that people love? What was their last evergreen?
We tried to
Blackest Night, was that what we got to?
Sandman.
Grant Morrison's New X-Men.
Grant Morrison's New X-Men,
maybe.
Yeah. No matter what we do, we go back 10 years or more. And the further back you go, it's more of a pure concept. You know what I mean?
Right.
All the way back to me in my head, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby on Fantastic Four. And then you stop
once again, it's the creators you think of first, and we don't think of that first anymore.
Right.
I mean, if you ask me who being an indie guy, if you ask me what my favorite comics are, there should be a Steranko or Wrightson. There's nothing right that way. If you ask me who my favorite creator, what my favorite comics are, I go to Stan Sakai's Usagi Yojimbo, Terry Moore's whatever. It's immediately, I'm a guy who goes right to the creators. I don't know that a mainstream Marvel and DC fan can do that these days.
Well, you know what? I'm going back to these little conversations I had. I might have talked to Scott about it. I know Tim Anderson pops up, a guy named Hatfield back in the 2000s. We started looking at comic books the same way I was looking at music. We finally started having a lot of rock and roll stars dying, and you start realizing there's nobody coming up to fill that void. When they're gone, and that's what comic books are starting to feel like.
And every collection you see, every omnibus is writer driven.
Yeah,
you see, this Dan Slott's Spider-Man, whoever's, I can't even think of. It's always the writer's omnibus, not the artists. That's how diminished the artists are who used to drive the creativity in the industry.
And there's also a little bit of marketing that was going on. I don't know if it's going on now, where they were trying to tell you what a classic run was, not react to the fans saying this is a classic run. They wanted to tell you, and I'm like, no, I'm like, that's everybody's gut reaction that read comic books.
It's like, what you talking about, Willis?
Yeah. Anybody who read comic books for more than 5 minutes were like, no,
And
I don't even think
it's what's this?
Right.
And I don't even think it's a quality issue in terms of the talent involved, because there's obviously talented people making these comic books. I think it's the context in which they create them doesn't let them.
It's almost like the more control they try to have over the product, the more they're shooting themselves in the foot. If they want to make money, if they left it alone, it would start making money on its own.
Yes.
Better than it is now. I'm not saying to be a huge success. I'm not saying that's what would save everything, but it would be better than what they're doing now.
If they just let the creators create.
Yes.
And not worry so much about, and not having marketing drive everything, they'd be selling more comics. But they can't do that because the marketers are in charge.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And I'm going back thinking about the 90s, and I think we talked about this too, but I remember in the 90s where they split all the comics. You had the Spidey books, the Marvel Edge books.
They put them into different groups. That was one of the things they tried.
Yeah. So maybe I think that's the first time that people who read comic books started wondering what are they doing, and that's the first time they really thought about the suits and that the marketing. We called them suits,
Right.
And what did they end up doing? Giving for some of their books to image guys. So that's what they ended up.
That was one of the suits upstairs idea.
Mm-hmm.
And it was successful. They sold a lot of comics, but it made everybody resent. There was a lot of resentment going on during those bankruptcy years because
sure,
there was all sorts of deals being made outside of the normal structure of things that made the people who had to stick to the normal structure of things very resentful.
Gotcha.
Yeah, events have replaced creative. That's what I'm talking about. The marketing is driving everything.
I finally saw some people. What's the big event going on at DC now? See what I'm saying? The Robin King or something.
The death metal thing.
Yeah. People are hating it, and they're on social media saying they're hating it. And then you'll have one guy trying to be a Marvel zombie being like, well, it's or maybe defending it, saying that it outsold Empire or something. There's some people out there still trying to do the DC versus Marvel thing. And nobody's buying it. There's no arguments or anything. You just got one guy running around looking like an idiot trying to take on everybody. And they're like, no, this sucks.
I think that DC, can you imagine if we all stop talking about Marvel and DC? Just stop talking about them.
Yes. Thank you.
No, but they're interesting. They're interesting how they're killing. They drive the whole industry. And they're shooting themselves in the foot. That's what's so interesting about
You're the guy that watches NASCAR to see the wreck. You don't know one driver. I know what's going on.
I mean, I don't read any of the comics. And that's a problem. I go to the comic shop every week and buy comics, and there's not even a chance I'm buying Marvel and DC comics now. Right. That's how fascinating it is to me that how have they looked? I mean, I've always been an indie guy. But I would always dip into Marvel or DC every now and then to check in and see how things are doing. I haven't even done that in 5, maybe 10 years. How have they lost me so terribly?
Right. A couple years ago, I figured out I went through a period of mourning. I've already mourned for what's happened now. You know what I mean? Like I saw it coming. I didn't know what was going on with me. I was like depressing videos and not knowing I had idea what I was doing. I was in mourning over.
It is purely academic for me to sit here and try and figure out exactly how they made such a disaster of things.
It's funny you mentioned that because, like back in the '80s, I would look through previews and look at everything. All the Marvel, DC titles, and everything. Right. Now, the only time I do that is I run a scan to see if Michael Clute is doing a cover for somebody.
Yeah.
There's not even and how did they lose you? That's the thing. How did it happen?
They said that these comics weren't made for me to start.
Well, there is that. But once again, I think that has to do with marketing and that they haven't said that in a while. But I think that's once again, that was just a marketing idea.
Yeah. Well, neither Marvel nor DC have a marketing team that knows how to go look for other markets that makes it okay to get rid of the current one. Yeah. They don't have characters or stories set up for different types of audiences.
Yeah,
but they're more concerned about product than quality.
I heard that for years. The problem is those different types of audiences there was always an undercurrent in comics of the sort of comics professionals hating their own fans because they were comics geeks, their own fans, There's definitely some of their own fans who were embarrassing people. And there was also always an undercurrent of only these guys are buying our comics. If only we could sell them to the rest of the population, we'd all be rich. But every time they tried to sell them to the rest of the population, they weren't interested.
But the rest, the rest of the population is not interested in these comics. Right. There's no point in trying to make Spider-Man appealing to housewives or X-Men appealing to lawyers who play golf.
And I'll get a cliche here, man, because I do know I watched Days of Our Lives during the summers back in the day. So I'm not, yes, I had, Patch was cool. Okay. Anyway, but the thing is that they don't try to make the soap operas like in the 80s. They didn't try to make them for men, if that makes sense. Right. They still had the idea but men watch them. What's the secret? You got my mind. Look out, man. No.
Yes.
It's Josh friends he's talking to. They're send a thing saying they're
Like a horror movie.
I'll be out in a few minutes.
I can't figure out how to get to them.
She came out of the darkness. That black shirt cracked me up. I was like, look out.
Scared you? I have to go get off now, but we are 2.5 hours in. So
All right, man.
here's what I'll end with: Harlequin romances. That one imprint, that one book imprint, is bigger than the entire comic industry.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Nobody's ever cared about selling Harlequin romance novels to guys.
Right.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah. Who's your
Ever.
audience? Yeah. There's
They
nothing
know
wrong
their
with-
audience. Yet superhero comics are obsessed with selling superhero comics to not guys. And it's like, why?
Right.
That's what has always baffled me.
It's
All right,
odd.
but anyway, I have to go now. There's some birthday thing going on for me. So
I'm glad that went well. Have a happy birthday.
Yeah.
I'll catch you guys later.
Enjoy.
If you're going to continue talking, we'll catch
Yeah.
you later. Have a good one.
Later.
Bye.
See you later, man.
Man, that was actually good talk. Yeah, but coming back here. Now here's something here. Are you guys up for still going? I mean,
Yeah.
Okay. This is actually something I sort of not so much predicted, but I've kind of said how people are just hungry for a key book that you got to be careful. And here we are. First, it was the Batman Who Smiles. Am I getting that right? The Judge Death ripoff. I'm just going to call it right. And then we had Punchline a few months ago. Now here we are at Robin King. There's no sustainability. These guys don't have. They're not going to be around for as long as Wolverine has, who popped up like that. You know what I'm saying?
I wonder if they picked the title Robin King just to cash in on the popularity of Tiger King.
It's that stupid to where, 10 years ago, I'd have chuckled at that. But now I'm afraid to say anything because this is how stupid they are with some of this stuff. That actually could be a thing. But, this just kind of shows you where we're at. Somebody's going to pay $24 for this online plus shipping.
No.
And then they're never going to get that money back. These books don't sustain. They'll have their fans because this is where they're coming in on comics,
Right.
But
I think that this idea that the comics are become key issues which sell for more money, this is the wrong message. If we're trying to get other people to read comics, and we already know that's not true for superheroes, but it doesn't help if we convince the rest of the world that they're going to get rich by buying a comic for $4 and selling it for $24.
Yeah. But the thing is that I can sit here and kind of decipher why this. I can back up what I'm saying with this is that, first of all, it's not an original creation. It's derivative. It's just another version of Robin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's nothing new there. I don't think it's really nothing new. They're just putting different clothes on the same character, and trying to have a clever storyline.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, 2 or 3 months more, if they put out comics regularly and stuff, there's going to be one more character like that, and it's going to be another version of a superhero that's already out there. The Batman Who Smiles, I gave it a chance, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, oh no,
Am I the only person that ever read Batman that just didn't really care for Robin?
You're not the only one, but
It depends on the year.
I prefer Batman by himself, but that's just me.
to me, it's Batman and Robin. And when Batman's doing his thing, that means Robin's hanging out with the Teen Titans. That's how I always read it, But to me, Robin's an important. I don't know. He's like a blasting cap in a bigger formula for Robin.
Plastic cap.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy.
I'm one of those guys that call it out, just like everybody else who says it or jokes about it. He puts them in bright clothes and throws them out there. Who's the target?
Shoot the kid, not me.
Yeah, and I never understood, like, with the classic 70s Batman logo, why are you going to put a bright yellow target on your chest?
Frank Miller explained it so they'd hit the Kevlar, the bulletproof.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah. And I did a video a couple years ago about Robin being important to Batman, and it was really odd because I got hate for it, but it was like private hate. they would message me.
Really?
They didn't want for some reason they didn't want to come out and talk about Robin in public. It was weird.
I'm going to show my age here, but the Batman book that I would read is never going to get published in today's publishing. I would like to see a street level Batman being the world's greatest detective, doing, something that's not at a superhero level and is not really tied to the rest of the DC universe where they have to have the obligatory guests, hero, guest villain pop up.
You want something. You want something that's got its own world built up in that book, and
I think basically what I want is the Batman the animated series done as a straight comic book.
Yeah. Go for that pulpy feel a little bit too.
But like I said, that's never going to happen. So.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know, but I'm sitting here cracking up because like Gore Vidal came up here and was like, "Hey, I didn't care for Robin either," and then he brings in the boy from Tarzan. I just took 2 shots.
Oh wow, I never thought about it that way, but
I took 2.
I see what he means.
Hey, I just took 2 shots to the chest, man. I'm like, okay, I got to recover here, Yeah. Well, then Paulo's right on it. Well done. Well played.
It was not correct.
And then no, he wasn't Paulo. Okay.
No.
I'm also the guy that my favorite Tarzan movies where he went to New York. So
I've seen that one.
I love that one.
Well, the other ones look derivative, but New York to me looked cheap.
Tarzan's New York Adventure.
Yeah,
it was the 40s, man. Come on, there's a war going on.
Buy more buns and stamps.
That was a mid-budget back then.
Are you familiar with the very first Tarzan movie that was done back in
15 or something?
Somewhere in through there. It was shot in Louisiana.
What?
Yeah, it was shot in the swamps of Louisiana. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, way before Johnny Weissmuller was, ever a name.
Well, I'm not sure, but I think the first serials that I watched was PBS Sunday morning. I found the show. I found the intro to the show on YouTube finally about 2-3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. But it was the infamous one where the character of Jane was swimming naked underwater.
Right.
Before they had the movie codes or rating system or whatever. And that was like the first one I saw, and I didn't see nudity there. This is the freaking jungle. You know what I mean? I think it's a mindset.
Well, part of that was actually cut out, but it was left in the European release for the theatrical releases.
As about probably as a little 7-year-old little boy, I'm willing to bet money that somehow PBS showed the European version. I mean, it was
maybe.
Yeah, it's
funny you mentioned PBS. Like when I was a kid, that was the only opportunity we had to see Doctor Who.
Yeah,
and they would never show episodes in continuity. So one week you'd have Baker, another week you'd have Pertwee, or whoever the Doctor of the month was. And they would never be shown in order. And there was no continuity. So, 1 week he'd have Kanan, and the next week he'd have a completely different companion. And even as a kid, that confused the hell out of me.
See,
what is going on here? I don't understand this.
Yeah, for people who don't know, PBS is how Doctor Who came to America, as far as I know. This is like the late 70s. I think I discovered it in the 80s. Mm-hmm. I looked up, man. They just showed, all they would show were the Tom Baker ones. And there was a couple of storylines they didn't show. But we had a pretty good, run there where we saw most of them in order. But they were real big on the Leela years, the Savage that was with them.
Right.
And, but Doctor Who was amazing because, like, you would watch it, maybe go to school and kind of mention it to some people, and they just kind of looking at you funny, like PBS and all this stuff. Right. And then they had the 5 Doctors movie come on PBS, and it was an event in my town where nobody went out, and all of a sudden everybody was coming out of the closet as a Doctor Who fan. And this had to be like 1983 or something, Yeah. So that's when I started like noticing that people had secrets. They weren't what they appeared to be. I was like, you like geeky stuff. Come on,
Yeah.
Maureen Sullivan. That was, yes.
Maureen Sullivan was a gorgeous lady.
Oh man. Well, guys, I hate to do this, but I just see now. I thought it was almost 8 o'clock, and it's almost 9 o'clock. I've got to eat and get up early in the morning. I got to get up at 7 in the morning, which will be noon for Paulo. He'll be getting out of bed at the same time.
That'll be about 2 p.m. for me.
2 p.m. for Scott.
It's 2 a.m. here right now, almost 2 a.m.
Cool. Let me check the comments here, and we'll get out of here. I didn't like the Robin till Damien. See, I was the guy.
I have a soft spot for Tim Drake.
I was the guy that the only one I didn't like was Jason Todd, and I loved what they finally did with him.
Well, sleepy readers that just because of the name Damien.
Batman's Grave was trying to do that. What is Batman's Grave? Did I miss something?
I have no idea.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. Okay. Well, guys, as always, thanks for everybody that popped in here. Check out Paulo's channel. Everybody harass Scott till he gets a camera. And
Scott needs to get a job first.
Yeah. And everybody
we can open a crowdfunding for Scott's camera.
Oh God! Be careful what you wish for.
Here's what I think you can do, Scott. Okay, I have some blank cassette tapes still wrapped up that I feel good that are still there. So what we're going to do
You
is
talking about VHS?
Yeah. So what you're going to no cassette tapes like
audio
cassette tapes, audio cassette tapes. So what we'll do is we'll record
hookup.
Yeah, we're going to record you doing 30 minutes on the guitar or however long those tapes last, and charge a pretty penny for them trade them for a camera.
That's not going to happen.
And you'd be surprised. All right, guys. So thanks for popping in here, guys. And there's one or two people wanting to come on the show over the next few weeks, so we'll work that out. Make sure everybody's got room. And everybody have a good weekend.
See you later. Bye.
See you later. Bye.